want to do that?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it at the end. I'm like really good at it on the spot.
Great. Can you
chairs are
CC me in the email?
These chairs are made for somebody not my size.
I think I did.
You send that to me again?
All right, let's see.
Because I'm done. What time do you send that to me? Oh, hold on. Ali Ruan's word questions.
Begin.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. May we have a reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement?
Wait, no, I don't have it.
Top of the agenda.
The mission of the Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to reach their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. Okay, there was no action taken in closed session. Next is approval of the agenda. Does anyone want any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Next is the consent calendar. I know the superintendent would like to make a comment on item 2A to introduce our new director of student services. I would like to pull item 4A from the consent calendar and put it under review and action. Does anyone else want anything in the consent? Jacob?
Yeah, I wanted to pull something from the consent calendar, and that would also be number 2 for discussion.
Just for discussion?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else? All right. So, Jacob, did you want to start?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of state the process that was involved for number 2. I don't remember the board as a whole talking about the new hiring position. There's been people speaking at board meetings and in emails and in telephone calls asking for a hiring freeze, and I was just kind of surprised that the board never discussed any of the possibilities with the upcoming budget cuts. So maybe in the future, the board can have a discussion about topics that are related to what the public is asking for, and we didn't have that.
Okay. Are you requesting we put a hiring freeze on the agenda? So we can have a discussion about it?
Well, I would like the board to have a discussion. I mean, we have meetings, and we have a place for people to come and express their wishes, and for us to not even discuss it, it was just a little bit odd to me.
Well, that's fine. The only way we can discuss it would be in an open session, so that would have to be on the agenda. Someone want to second that?
You know, if you'd like to have a discussion, it sounds like it might include the idea of a hiring freeze. It might be a little broader than that. Am I hearing that correctly? I think I'd like to have some kind of discussion like that too.
Okay. We'll need some clarification as what that agenda item will be. If that's clear to you, Charlie, you can pass it on to the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Next, Val.
Thank you, President Black, members of the board, student board members. I'm pleased to announce Carrie Neerheim went through our process for hiring a director of student services as a director 1 position, and we went through several rounds of interviews and vetted very carefully our candidate finalists. Carrie Neerheim has been an educator for 23 years. She was a teacher for 14 years, where she taught 1st through 5th grades at the elementary level and the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade self-contained opportunity class. She was the special education extended school year coordinator for 8 years, which served preschool through high school students. Carrie Neerheim worked with the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, training high school students in peer mediation, and taught classroom management to teachers through the University of the Pacific. Carrie was a teacher on special assignment first at the elementary level and then at a K-8 school where she served as the assistant principal for a year. She then became the principal of Magical Murray Elementary School. It's actually Murray Elementary School in Dublin, where she has been for the last 7.5 years. She and her staff were awarded the Gold Ribbon and Title I Achievement Awards for their innovative response to intervention program. She is currently 6 months away from completing her doctoral degree in educational leadership for social justice at Cal State East Bay. And she's the proud mother of 2 adult daughters. And so I thank you for letting me introduce Carrie Neerheim as part of this. And she is here once the board completes its process on the consent calendar. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other comments or questions on the consent calendar from the public? Minus item 4A, do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
So I move approval of the consent calendar.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Good, that brings us to the board and superintendent report.
Thank you, President Black. Actually, I have 2 items that I would like to report. As many of you know, today there was a tragic shooting that occurred at Rancho Tehama Elementary School. And I just wanted to say that our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of those who are affected by this terrible shooting. Also, Albany High School today hosted their Town Hall 2.0, where students and staff were invited to share their thoughts and ideas on an essential question. Do we still have issues of racism at Albany High, and what can we do to work together to get to, through, and beyond problems and into positive solutions? Principal Alexia Ritchie and 2 students, Alaba Don Pedro and Melody Cohen, facilitated this discussion. There are about 30 to 35 students and staff at the Town Hall 2.0, and it was a good town hall meeting. And I really want to say that the Albany High School ROP culinary students created a homemade 200 Unity cupcakes, of which I ate 4. They were really only this big. And if it pleased the board and with your permission, Carrie Neerheim is here, and I just wanted her to maybe say a couple of words of if the board is okay with that.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Neerheim?
Good evening. I just want to thank Superintendent Val Williams and the Board of Trustees for having me here. It is a huge opportunity to get to join a district that I consider to have incredible vision, and I am honored to get to be a part of what Albany School District is doing. I'm very excited to be here. I can't wait to learn from all of you and bring what I know to the table to try and assist as our students in any way possible. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my report.
Right, anyone else? Board members? Yes, Ross?
I only assume that the PTSD from being rained on made you forget the fact that almost all of us in the room were at the groundbreaking for the AMS Annex.
I had to leave something for you guys to talk about.
But ground was broken on the AMS Annex. So, weather willing and all that, 1.5 years from now, there will be a building there.
Anyone else? Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to report out on a couple of things I've done since the last board meeting. Not necessarily in particular order, but both of my children go to Cornell, and we went to the Cornell PTA International Friendsgiving Potluck. It was a wonderful event where the families got together. Some of the students there, their parents, and other people who were with them did an Aztec ceremonial dance, and a lot of people joined in. There was also another parent who was really good at the saxophone, and her friend who plays the trumpet. At the end of the night, they played some music for everybody, so it was just a wonderful event. Also, since the last board meeting, I had the opportunity to meet some of the Albany High School students at Albany High with Navin and Mahima, and I think later on they're going to report out a little bit about what the students had to say. I also went to the budget committee, the first one that we had at district office last week, and I want to thank all the parents and staff, teachers, and administrative staff who was there. It was a first step, and hopefully we can have more of those. And also, the last one, I just wanted to report out that I'll be meeting at the middle school next week to get some input from some of the students there about the upcoming budget cuts. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
As a football parent, I can't let this opportunity to go by to mention the AHS homecoming that was Friday, October 27th. We played Richmond, and it was an incredibly exciting game, and it came down to the last minute, and we ended with a tie. But, I mean, watching this game was like an edge of the seater, boy. It was very exciting, and I'm extremely proud of our football team.
Thank you. And anyone else? Student board member report.
Thank you, President Black. Homecoming week was a huge hit at the high school. Students united as classes enjoyed the inter-class competition and embraced school unity at the end of the week.
Which class won?
1-8 dominate, of course.
AHS's theater ensemble's Bus Town showed this past weekend in the Little Theater. It was a fun show. Kudos to the theater department.
Congratulations to Albany boys cross country team for a clean sweep of the Frosh/sophomore JV and varsity races at the TCAL Championships this past Thursday. That makes it 3 years in a row that our boys have won the championship banner.
Also, special congrats to Riley Harmon and Calder Abbott for winning the varsity races in speedy times. Riley successfully defended the title she won last year.
The Albany Middle School Physical Education Department is hosting the second annual AMS Turkey Trot next Tuesday on 11/21/17. Come out and support our Cobras.
The annual AMS Arts and Crafts Fair will be on Sunday, December 3rd. Come one, come all. Come relish in everything from painting to woodwork, card making to knitting, jewelry making, and more.
Ocean View is having a fundraiser with the Golden State Warriors. Bring your family and friends out to cheer the 2017 NBA champions as they take on the Sacramento Kings on November 27th. A portion of each ticket sold will benefit Ocean View. In addition, the first 10,000 fans will receive a David West limited edition bobblehead.
Parent-teacher conferences have begun at Cornell Elementary School and will continue on until Wednesday, the 21st.
Cornell's English Language Advisory Committee, ELAC, will meet from 8:30 to 9:25 this Wednesday, November 15th, in the upstairs annex next to the Chinese school.
The Pink Squad, a student-organized fifth grade group from Marin Elementary, will be hosting a bake sale this Thursday, November 16th, from 1:40 to 2:30. All of the money raised will support hurricane and fire recovery. Look for their table by the office and enjoy delicious nut-free treats for $1 each. They are also doing a book collection for local kids in need. Drop a new or gently used kids' book in their bin. And lastly, on Thursday, November 2nd, Board Member Clark and the student board members coordinated a forum after school at the high school in order to promote more discourse regarding the budget restructuring that will be taking place soon. Students asked questions about the budget and also provided input regarding their priorities.
That concludes the student board report.
Thanks. Will we get a report on what their priorities were?
I can read it now, or Mahima was the one who put it together. I don't know if you want it sent to you, or...
You want? Is it?
Yes,
I have it up if you want
Or actually, we're.
If you want to take it, that's the next.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Is that cool?
Okay.
Thank
So these are some of the, this is the input that came from Albany High School students. So one of the inputs was looking into the possibility of administrative costs versus the surrounding administrative costs for other districts and maybe readjusting that. Another unique idea was to cut the number of PE classes and look into how Berkeley High School allows waivers for students who do sports outside of school and implement this procedure to reduce the number of blocks sophomore year.
We also had an extremely large turnout from the, arts departments, so band, choir, orchestra, and ADC. and dance turned out to show their support for the arts programs, which they and we believe are integral to this school experience.
One thing that was a repeated sentiment was making sure that our teachers stay, because one thing that really distinguishes our district is the amount of dedication and hard work that our teachers put into the classroom. Also maintaining small class sizes, because it does promote more discussion, more active participation. And in general, students had a lot of support for the arts, for the humanities, and also other extracurricular activities that the district funds.
Anything else you want to talk about? A great thing that actually came out of this meeting was an appreciation for all our staff, including the janitorial staff. A lot of students, brought up the fact of the work they do goes largely unnoticed, and so we have actually a new box in the main atrium where people can write notes to the different staff members and leave it in there, so like little compliments and stuff from the students. I think that was a really great part of that experience.
And lastly, the most, I guess, popular sentiment was that students wanted more information regarding the budget as is, and having that information in a way that's clear and digestible for students who don't have a financial background. A lot of students said that talking about these issues and what we want done is really hard to accomplish and just discuss when we're not as educated or as informed as we'd like to be.
Terrific, thank you. Can you put that in a form that you can give to Jackie to put in the minutes?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you.
Okay, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. If you have something you want to talk about, you're welcome to come up. Please try to keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less.
Good evening. My name is Joanna Pace. I'm a teacher at Albany Middle School. I've been there for a few years. And first, I want to thank everybody here who was at the groundbreaking yesterday. And Superintendent Williams, thank you particularly for how you organized it. And it was a really lovely combination of speeches where we had some history of the site, and you had Principal Brill give a little history of the process in the last few years, trying to figure out how exactly to put kids on that site, and then to hear from our marvelous, heroic parents who ran the bond campaign and succeeded in convincing people to pay more money so we could build schools. It's going to be a lovely addition, and I appreciate the ceremony very much. I think it's very important to mark transitions and celebrate accomplishments such as getting a bond passed, or 2 bonds passed. So I hope that doesn't count in my 3 minutes. My name is Joanna Pace. I'm a middle school teacher at Albany Middle School, and I'm here tonight to talk with some budget recommendations from a teacher's point of view. Albany Middle School, was recognized recently in Washington, D.C., the only California public school to receive the, I believe it's called a Gold Ribbon School Award. Our principal and one of our teachers went there and represented us. And we succeeded in winning that award, partly because some people put a lot of time into writing that application, but they were able to do that because we are a well-oiled machine over there. All the various community parts of this very supportive community have come together to provide us with the things we need to make a very successful middle school. I hate to think of any part of that being taken away. And any budget recommendation that will affect classrooms, affect students, is a bad idea. So my first recommendation is make the cuts as far away from the classroom as you can. We want to keep everything we have. My second recommendation is that we of course try to reduce administration. I understand that other districts spend a smaller percent administration, and I believe we're currently at 7.9%, and let's try to reduce it to, say, 6%. We could save some money there. And then let's change board policy. Let's not have such a big reserve. I know we don't do things the way other districts do. We don't do things just because other districts do it, but there's context and practice out there that we can look at. And if we were to have a smaller but still sufficient reserve, we could squeeze out some money there. And then The other item that I'd like to address tonight is transparency. There's a deep need for clarity on the budget. The district must provide more information to stakeholders and clarify information already provided, such as disaggregated information about outside contractors, restricted versus unrestricted funds, and fixed expenditures need to be made public in order for stakeholders to make informed recommendations, as our student board member was saying, about cuts, and so that you can then make informed decisions on behalf of the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Move on to staff report, promoting safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for all students and staff.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Curriculum Instruction Assessment and Student Services right now, Marie Williams, who will talk to us about the California dashboard. Ms. Williams.
Good evening, Superintendent Williams, board members, members of the community. Since April, we have been providing biweekly updates, highlighting, for the most part, activities that are taking place at our various sites and throughout the district to promote safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for all students. This evening's report, we are going to take a little step back and reacquaint ourselves with the California dashboard. Next slide. Because as part of the California dashboard, there are several metrics that we might use to measure safe, supportive school environments. In past years, school success was measured pretty narrowly based on test scores, student test achievement, and with the introduction of the local control funding formula, the local control and accountability plan, we now have a California dashboard that provides 10 indicators of school success. So we went from kind of one to now this many indicators of school success. And so there are state indicators and local indicators. And so this slide just shows you the 6 state indicators, which are high school graduation rate, academic performance, so that's measuring performance on the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment, suspension rates, English learner progress, preparation for college and career, and chronic absenteeism. Some of these indicators we have looked at in other contexts, but this will be our second year looking at all of these data sets together, and then also disaggregating data by student ethnic groups to measure where the gaps are. There are also local indicators. So the local indicators will come to you at the next board meeting on November the 28th as a staff report. The local indicators ask about basic conditions, so basically Williams compliance, implementation of academic standards, so that's the extent to which we're progressing with implementing standards, school climate surveys, and then also parent involvement and engagement. So as we look at those 10 indicators, there are several. I think one might argue that all of them, to some extent, might be used to measure safe, supportive school environments. But there are some that I've highlighted here that measure specifically the extent to which we're promoting and providing safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for students. So the basic conditions, which is a local indicator, suspension rates, which we're looking at in a different way than we have previously. Chronic absenteeism is looking at the percentage of students that miss 10% of school or more in a year. The State Department has yet to really decide how this indicator will be measured, so stay tuned for more information about that. School climate measured through a local climate survey. What you'll see on the 28th of November is that we are bringing a summary of our most recent administration of the California Healthy Kids Survey, and we will be administering the California Healthy Kids Survey during this school year, 17-18, and then also looking at parent engagement and involvement. So here are some indicators at the state level that we might use to measure the extent to which we are providing safe, supportive environments for students, in addition to our biweekly snapshots and highlights around things that are happening at the local level in our district. Slide. I think this has been covered before, but I just, by way of a reminder, want to remind us that in previous years where we measured based on a number that was derived from test performance for that particular year. Moving forward, we will be looking at progress. So the dashboard will provide an indicator that is based on current status, so how we're performing right now, and then also change, which is how we've performed in the past. The week of November 27th, 2017, the full dashboard will be available publicly on our website, accessible by all members of the public. In the month of November, indicators will be released for private preview a couple at a time to give districts an opportunity to preview the data. And so as we continue to talk about promoting safe, supportive, and collaborative environments, we now will be using some of these lenses to have those conversations. So just wanted to make sure that we are reminded of these elements as we move into the rest of the year, because these will be coming back in some conversations that we're having later on. That concludes my report.
Thanks. Questions or comments from the board? Hema?
Hi, Ms. Williams. I really appreciate this, you putting this together. I think that making sure that we have measures in place to maintain and improve our learning environments is really important, and this definitely works toward that. One thing that I think we've discussed before is having measures like the Healthy Kids Survey is great because it's something that compares Albany to like a level playing field to the rest of the state, and I think the rest of the country as well. Is it administrator? Okay. But what I wanted to maybe suggest is maybe something that, maybe some sort of measure that's implemented on a site level, something that's not as dense as the Healthy Kids Survey, and maybe something that would allow input that's less numerical on a scale. You know, the Healthy Kids Survey asks, are you involved in, or on a scale between 1 and 5, how much do you feel like there's a sense of community, you know? And I think getting something that's, you know, that provides a space for students to like answer in words rather than numbers, I think would also be beneficial and help us make changes that are specific to sites. But thank you. I really appreciated this.
Thanks for that suggestion.
Interesting suggestion. Anyone else? Kim?
I think that I'm hoping that I can encourage our student board members to encourage the students of Albany High to actually do the Healthy Kids Survey. It is dense, it is long, but it is our opportunity to mine actual data and to take it seriously, because we look at those results and we use those results for years, and we build programs based on those results. So the more responses that we get and the more complete and accurate those responses are, the better we can serve student needs. And then somewhat slightly tangentially, I just read a news story today that the academic performance state indicator has, they've just changed the baseline for that, because across the state, the test scores were flat and showed so little improvement that so many districts were going to be in the red, the failing. And when they are failing, that requires state support. That instead what they did is they changed the brackets to move more of them into the orange scale.
So they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, it was disappointing to read that.
It is. Thanks, Kim. Anyone else? Anyone in the audience? Okay. We have a report on election methods.
Thank you, President Black. The purpose of this item is for the board to receive a presentation from a member of the City of Albany Charter Review Committee on election methods. Several years ago, the City of Albany's Charter Review Committee engaged with the Albany Unified School Board on the topic of ranked choice voting as part of a study the committee did over a course of several years. And at that time, the committee's interest was motivated to explore if our democracy might be improved. But since then, there's been an increase in the rate in which school districts are being compelled to shift from what is called plurality at large voting to plurality by district. And so we have Preston Jordan is here I met with him, and he gave me quite an education on some vocabulary terms. But he would like to make a presentation to the board, providing some information about this topic. So I'm going to turn this over to Preston. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you, board, for making time for this evening. Since I was last here 6 years ago, I think only one of you was on the board at that time, so you may not be aware that there is a chapter in the city charter regarding the school board, and it defines the number of school board members, the staggered election, the election method. So that's why we're here. It's not necessarily common in the state that that school boards are covered in city charters, but it's not entirely rare either. So that provides some opportunities. It provides cities more control and school districts more control over their future to have a charter, which is essentially a constitution, if you will, for the city. So I'm the vice mayor of the charter review. I'm the vice chair of the charter review committee, and Jim Lindsay in the back there is the chair of the charter review committee. And so, yeah, about 7 years ago, the charter review committee realized there were a variety of election methods that were available to elect the school board and the council, and decided to conduct a study to determine if some other method would be better for the city. We spent about 3 years doing that study, so I'm not here tonight to try to cram your head full of everything that went on with that. But I will say we've selected and elicited criteria. We selected criteria, then we selected the methods that we were going to rate based on those criteria. And the upshot of it all was that the Charter Review Committee determined that ranked choice at large was the best method for Albany. So why is that? First, to understand our current method, plurality at large. So the plurality piece, a great example, recent example of just the plurality part is the election of the mayor of Fremont over the last 2 election cycles. So in 2012, the mayor of Fremont was elected with 34% support, voter support. There were a lot of candidates on the ballot. There was a lot of vote splitting, so no candidate had majority support. 2016, just last year, that mayor ran as an incumbent. There were far fewer candidates. The voters coalesced around a candidate, and they elected that candidate instead of the mayor that they had. So it's a great example of sort of the vagaries and the pathologies of plurality elections. You can elect people with far less than a majority. The majority of people can actually prefer somebody else. So if you go to plurality at large, one way I think of it is it's kind of a sporting event or a betting pool. So we each create our own dream team ticket. We use our vote to create our team of candidates that we want to win. And we hope our team wins, but if our team wins, then somebody else's team loses. And so that, in fact, does happen. In 2004, and the reason I'm going back to 2004 is because that's the last time the registrar reported data sufficient to do these calculations, which is its whole own issue. But in 2004, for instance, the Berkeley School Board, which is 5 members as well on a 3-2 stagger, elected two members were elected. The top vote getter had 37% support. And so if both those candidates were supported by the same block of voters, is kind of the political science term, then that means that the majority of people did not gain representation as a result of that election. So the probability of gaining representation was 37% or less, which is not all that encouraging to take the time and go vote. In Albany's elections in that year, there were 3 council members who were elected. 2 of them were elected with minority support, political minority support, or less than half the voters supported them. And for school board, 1 of the school board members was elected with less than half the voters supporting. So you can have the potential that a majority of the body is constituted of members who are supported by less than half of the voters. In contrast, ranked choice at large has sort of minimum probabilities of a voter being able to elect a representative. And in a 2-seat race, and we can go into the math if you want, but my hope is we'll put that off till a future meeting. But in a 2-seat race, the minimum probability is 67%. So if you go to the polls, you have a 2/3 chance guaranteed that you will elect a representative. And in a 3-seat race, it's 75% chance. So the probability of your vote being effective and you actually electing somebody to represent you is much higher. And that's really the main reason the Charter Review Committee found this to be the better method, because the consequence of that is there's a far greater breadth of voices that are elected to the council and to the board from the community to have the conversation on the board and on the council that might otherwise happen in the community, but not happen on the board and council if a single block of voters is able to fill the entire board or council. Perhaps not surprisingly, ranked choice is associated with higher voter participation, higher voter turnout. Again, not surprising because the value of your vote is higher. Your vote is more likely to actually result in electing somebody. So you're motivated to turn out. More people are motivated to turn out. And it also has some benefit in terms of stability of government. In plurality at large, a small shift in voter support one way or another could radically shift the makeup of a board or council in an exaggerated sense. So if, say, the electorate is split 49%, 51%, then the board is constituted all of one perspective under plurality at large. And then if the electorate switches, then all of a sudden the board can be constituted entirely of the other perspective instead of having more of a balance of voices on the board. So those are some of the advantages that the Charter Review Committee saw. And the main disadvantage is the cost. There is a cost increment of going to ranked choice at large, and that is once the Alameda County Registrar can run the method, which the office cannot now. I should say that's not uncommon. Ranked choice for single seats is used in Berkeley, Oakland, and San Leandro, and they all asked for it before the registrar could do it. And as a result of their requesting it, the registrar went ahead and got the equipment to make it happen, and now they vote using ranked choice. But so the extra cost, we don't know for sure until we actually get to the point of talking to the registrar, but based on what happened in Oakland, Berkeley, and San Leandro, it would be around $10,000 a year extra cost. So if the benefit for democracy of the method isn't appealing, there is actually a stick, if you will, currently that has been gaining size rapidly. So there was something called the California Voting Rights Act that was passed in 2001, and it lowers the bar for protected groups to find that plurality at large is discriminatory. Now, protected groups are ethnic and racial groups. The Charter Review Committee wasn't focused on representation for any particular group. It's simply trying to increase the probability of representation for every individual. But under the California Voting Rights Act, a number of cities and school boards across the state have received lawsuit threats from law firms and essentially had to change to by-district elections. Now, if you think of Albany, by-district election, the Charter Review Committee ruled that any by-district method out right at the outset. It didn't even apply the criteria to those because Albany is so small already. If you divide it into 5 districts, you're really shrinking the candidate pool to something very, very small, which can both affect quality and even the likelihood if you have anybody step forward to run. But nonetheless, there are many cities, well, at least 6 that I'm aware of now, that are smaller than Albany that have been forced to go to district elections under the California Voting Rights Act. There's about 80 cities at this point that have either changed or are being compelled to change. There's 140 school districts out of the 1,000 school districts that have changed or are being compelled to change. And in just the last year, this action under the California Voting Rights Act has actually started hitting the Bay Area. So in the last year, Fremont has received a letter and is switching from at-large for council to by-district for council. Santa Clara, Mountain View, Santa Rosa, Martinez have all received letters as far as school districts. The Dublin School District has received a letter, Santa Rosa School District. There's a school district on the peninsula called the Sequoia High Union District, I think High School Union District. It actually covers from Atherton to East Palo Alto, which is, I guess you could see why they might receive one of these letters. That's a pretty diverse district. So that from media reports, and they're media reports, so you take them for the accuracy that they are, the average cost to a jurisdiction, if it receives one of these letters, is about $100,000, even without the lawsuit. So the way the law is written right now, if a jurisdiction receives a letter, the governing entity has, I think, 40 days to commit to changing to by district if it wants to hold off a lawsuit. And if it does that and then it follows the process, which is about 180 days, then the payment that it has to make to the law firm is limited to $30,000. And in addition to that, the jurisdiction in all likelihood has to hire a demographic firm to come up with district maps, draw lines. There's public hearings that have to be held, staff time that's involved, so all that adds to about $100,000. Now, whether or not Albany is potentially subject to receiving a California Voting Rights Act letter, I would say nobody knows because nobody's done the data analysis. It's easy to presume that we're not, but I think there's argument that perhaps we could be. And so I wouldn't view this potential transition to ranked choice voting as, just something nice for democracy that's a luxury, but it could provide you a proactive means for increasing the probability dramatically that Albany will not receive one of these letters, because the finding that's required under plurality at large, or what law firms look for, is what's called racially polarized voting. So is there a racial or ethnic group in the jurisdiction that votes for candidates that are different than the majority votes for? So those candidates don't have to be that ethnicity or race themselves. They just have to be shown to be preferred by a particular racial or ethnic group. And if that group can never get its preferred candidate elected because the majority is already voting for other candidates, then the firm has a case. Under ranked choice voting at large, you wouldn't have that. You couldn't really have racially polarized voting because groups would be able to elect candidates of their choice. So anyway, that's, I don't know how many minutes that was, but I was trying to keep it. I know we only have 20 minutes, and I wanted to give you time for questions. So my hope is that you will take an interest in this and meet with the Charter Review Committee in more of a study session format sometime in January and February, because it's obviously it can be a bit of an involved topic. And so I think it does deserve a little more time and maybe a little more opportunity for conversation. And we can bring in some visuals and other things that might help you understand the issue better. So that's what I would ask you to discuss tonight, is if you, as a body, have an interest in engaging in a study session in the new year. Thank you.
Jordan, you want to comment or question? Charlie?
So thank you very much, Preston. That was a very clear explanation. So first, I would like to express an interest in pursuing this further. So that's one of us anyway, to register some interest. Preston, I appreciate that your primary interest in the ranked choice voting is that it's better democracy. But of course, I'm also interested in the possibility that it provides at least some legal protection. We don't actually need any more lawsuits right now. We could do without that. Are there any cases, is there any empirical evidence that would indicate that the ranked choice voting does provide some legal protection against these kinds of lawsuits?
So there's no city currently that uses it, so there's no case law around that. In terms of what its effect is, it was actually used in more than 20 cities in the last century. And in those cities, often for the first time, racial and ethnic minorities were elected to the governing board. So it has demonstrated capability in that regard, which presumably would be protective if Albany got to the point where it was able to use it and demonstrate that under the current method, we didn't have racially polarized voting that was resulting in a lack of representation. So we know it's effective. We don't have cases. Santa Clara is actually gone past their window for limiting their lawsuit cost. But they're in discussion with that particular law firm about the possibility of splitting into two districts. So they have a 7-member body, 6 council members, and then a mayor elected at large. And they're looking at the possibility of splitting into 2 3-member districts and using ranked choice, multi-member ranked choice, or ranked choice at large within each of those 3-member districts. And from what I read, the law firm is amenable to trying to give them a chance to work that out. So I think it has a lot to do with the firm. If a firm sends a letter before Albany puts this on the ballot and passes it, or even afterwards, I think it has a lot to do with the nature of the firm that sends the letter, how open they are to discussion. And so there's one particular firm that's really picked up the pace in Southern California and has sent some of the letters in the Bay Area. And he's quoted as saying his main interest is improved democracy, not making money. And in fact, because the state legislature passed this law that limits losses to $30,000, he says it generally costs his law firm more than $30,000 to put one of these letters together because of all the data analysis that has to go into deciding whether there's a case in a city or not. So I know this is a long-winded answer, but that's kind of the state of affairs. So I can't point to any legal case that would say, yes, this would solve it. All I can point to is that it does eliminate racially polarized voting for the most part. And there is another city in the Bay Area that's moving in that direction and is gaining traction with the law firm that it is dealing with. So thanks for the question.
Good.
So if the school board said, yes, we'd love to hear more about ranked choice, and can you sort of walk us down the path of what would happen next before it came to be?
Yeah, great question. So from about 2012 to 2015, the Charter Review Committee did this study. For the next year, it formulated its position. Last year, it went to the City Council and asked for authorization to prepare a charter amendment that would specify a transition to ranked choice at large and specify the conditions that had to be met in order for that to occur, which would have to do with, it can't cost more than this, the registrar has to be able to run it. And the council did provide authority for us to prepare that amendment. And so the committee is in the throes of doing that now. And so part of the question here is, does that amendment include a transition for the school board, or does it only have a transition for the council? And of course, then it's up to the council whether to put it on the ballot ultimately. But in terms of what we proposed to the council, the draft that we proposed to the council could either include this body in the transition or not. It could stay the way it is. So that's kind of the near term. If the council chose to put it on the ballot and the voters chose to pass it, then there'd be a discussion with the registrar. There is the vendor of the current equipment that Alameda County uses, which is Dominion, has a new system that has just been certified by the state, which increases the number of rankings from 3 to 10, which obviously would be better for us since we're electing more seats. That said, they haven't put the ranked choice at large algorithm through state certification because they don't have a prospective client. So I expect at some point that if Santa Clara asks for it, Albany asks for it, then there'll start to be some reason for them to spend the money to do that. And I know that the registrar, the Alameda County registrar is looking at buying a new system in the next 2 to 5 years. So I think the timing is actually pretty good. If the voters should choose to pass it now, it's a good time to make the request because I can bend the curve of what the registrar does down the line. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When these law firms do whatever data analysis they do to decide whether there's a suit there, do they look at candidates? I mean, who actually ran or who had the opportunity to run?
So I've seen cases, and again, reading media articles, I haven't spoken to these firms personally, but reading media articles, I've seen cases where they have cited candidates who've run and who've run perennially and have lost, and they can show, based on precinct level analysis of returns and matching that with census data, that those candidates were probably preferred by a different ethnic or racial group than the majority racial or ethnic group. But I've also seen cases where they don't appeal to candidates historically having run and lost. They just say, 50% of the community is this group and it's never had representation, and it really doesn't matter if a candidate's run or not. It's just been unrepresented for 60 years in this city. So that there's a variety of approaches, and that's not an area of expertise of mine, but you might be able to, if it's a question of interest, you might be able to find out from your counsel, or your counsel might be able to talk to some lawyer who's got more expertise in that area as to what it takes, what are the findings that they look for.
Thanks. Anyone else? Russ?
Yeah, sort of relevant to this issue. I was an invitee to the Albany Democratic Club's evening where we talked. We had 3 folks from the City Council, and a number of commission members, et cetera. And so the discussion came up about election and service and all of that. One of the issues that came up, I think a huge one in terms of candidacy, is the fact you've got to fork over $900+ to the county to get yourself listed in the voter guide. If you'd want a statement in the voter guide, that's a huge impediment, probably more than most anything else in people running. And then I personally had some experience. I was a graduate student in Arizona when the issue of a Martin Luther King holiday came up, and there were two competing ballots, move Columbus Day to this or create a new one, et cetera. Each got about 45% of the vote, and we were the state that didn't pass that King holiday, unlike every other state in the union. So the mechanics around elections can be a huge influence as well. In fact, in the B&E election, because Measure E was on the back page of the ballot, it got several hundred votes less, for or against, just as a result of people not turning the page over. So there are some issues all around this. Personally, I absolutely would love to hear about ranked choice, because I think it's a great way to, we've seen it. The two candidates who would have split the vote in Oakland and yet percolated up, and one of them got it because both of them would have been preferred to the candidate who didn't get it.
Right. Yeah, and I think the case you cite in Arizona is interesting because while I think I'm only aware of one case where ranked choice has been applied to a measure, I think it could be a great tool in that regard because, I mean, you could use it to put, say, 3 different tax rates on the ballot as well as no.
Right.
And then instead of doing the polling and trying to read the tea leaves and figure out what people want, the election itself becomes the poll, which is essentially what an election is. So it would take a lot of the guesswork out of calibrating the number that you put on the ballot.
Do we have anyone in the audience who wants to ask questions? Well, please come up.
I actually don't have a question, but I wanted to give a statement in support of Preston's presentation. My name is Bridget Kennedy Acuna, and I'm a 20-year resident of Albany and proud mom of 7th grader at AMS. I'm a flagship member of Albany Community Action, which is a local group that sort of has emerged with the recent election. Policy and public health analyst professionally. When I heard that the City Charter Review Committee is recommending ranked choice at large, and when I got a chance to hear a little bit more from Preston, I was very enthusiastic to come and speak in support of it tonight. This is a proven method to bring more inclusion, discourse, and participation as a matter of course, as opposed to community response that primarily emerges in acute or urgent, or in response to urgent matters. It's closer to coalition-style voting, proactive, well-known in countries like Sweden and Holland and others where education, maternity leave, and childcare are considered best practice. So it's a well-known approach to being more inclusive. Like Preston pointed out, it would be a feather in our cap as a community championing democratic principles and modeling that in our actions. It doesn't displace, it brings more people in. So that's the neat thing. It doesn't displace, it brings more people in. It helps with dialogue and leads to more fluid and inclusive planning up front, so that we can avoid sometimes the polarity that emerges during more acute more acute situations. I urge the school board to consider this approach in its own charter language. So thank you.
Thanks. Was there someone else who wanted to? It's a race.
I'll be really quick. I'm Sasha Keller and also a mom of twins at AMS. When I heard Preston's presentation in another venue, I was just very excited about it. And I'm encouraged to hear that there are members of the board who are interested in a working group and would love to see maybe some collaboration between the school board and the city council to talk about that, and would welcome community opportunities to learn more about it. I think how we vote is so important, and sometimes I think we can all get a little overwhelmed with a lot of the terminology, but I do think it's something that that our community would be really interested in learning more about. And I think I'm also very motivated by the idea that if we were to get a letter and we had 45 days to make a decision, we would be forced into districts, which in a town of our size is just really, seems really ridiculous. So anyway, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tamara Keller, and I just have a really quick question about the cost. I think this all sounds really great. Like Sasha said, I think it sounds like it is much more inclusive and definitely something that should be, at the very least, looked into, if not really pushed for. But you mentioned the estimated cost of about $10,000. Who pays that? Is that the city of Albany? Is some of it the school board? Is it the county? Like, where does that come from?
So my understanding is that the registrar charges Albany a set amount per registered voter in the city for each election. Doesn't matter if 2,000 voters show up or 8,000 voters. They charge based on how many voters are registered. And that charge has been going up, I understand. I don't know. I have $10 a voter in mind. I don't know if that's correct or not. Because the school board is in the city's charter, I believe that that charge is paid for by both, or that the school district and the city split that charge. In other words, they don't each get charged individually, but they get charged as one entity. Now, I could be wrong on that. That's obviously something to check. The extra cost comes from the registrar charges an extra fee for ranked choice because it often involves another ballot card. So it's it's a separate card. It's more processing work. So that's they have some premium that they put on again per registered voter for the election, and then there would be potentially, and this was the case in the other cities, an additional cost to help amortize the cost of the equipment or the algorithm to run the election. So that would be a one-time upfront cost. So hopefully, but yeah, it's a good question. So I should get the answers to those more definitively unless somebody here happens to know them.
Thanks. Mahima?
I just had a few questions / comments. One thing is ranked choice doesn't require splitting into districts, right?
Yeah, so the form that we're looking at, ranked choice at large, does not require that.
So my comment was, I don't really see any good in moving into plurality by district because I think it would only really offer diversity in geographic region, and with something as small as Albany, I don't see that being beneficial. But I think ranked choice would be a really interesting idea to explore, because I think that it would allow more diversity and promote more people running and make it a more competitive election. But wouldn't ranked choice be a more inexpensive option because you wouldn't have a runoff?
So in the cities that adopted it, that was correct. They had a 2-round runoff system in order to try to guarantee that those who were elected by a majority of voters. So, for instance, in Berkeley would have its primary, if you will. It wasn't really a primary. It would have its first election in November. And if no candidate received a majority support, then they would have a runoff actually in February. Because of the expense and the low turnout, in the early last decade, there was a vote, or maybe late last century, there was a vote to change the threshold to trigger runoff to 40%. They were trying to basically eliminate runoff, so it was kind of like majority light or plurality strong, if you will. And yet there was still one race after that where no candidate got 40% of the vote, and they still went to a runoff. And so it's an extremely expensive proposition. And so part of the motivation in those other 3 cities, same was true in Oakland, although it did a June primary and then a November runoff. Which had its own problems because June primary turnout is much lower than November, so you get a different electorate in June, and it could be decided in June. But so they all went to ranked choice because they could essentially either eliminate the risk of having to run a runoff election, or in the case of Oakland, actually just eliminate another election altogether, which saved them a lot of money. Now, for Albany, because we use plurality, we don't use two-round runoff majority, it wouldn't save us money because we're willing to elect candidates with no minimum threshold % of voter support. So it would be actually an extra cost here.
Okay.
Yeah.
My only concern with rank choice is that it forces voters to be more informed. More informed about most candidates rather than just one.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were to move forward with exploring ranked choice, I would love to see, I guess, information about each candidate being more accessible to voters. Because we don't want people just ranking, their number one and then just putting stuff on the paper.
Right. Well, they could. Yes. Ideally, you would like people to rank more candidates because you get more information. It's better democracy. But people are allowed just to rank one candidate number one and turn in their ballot. And if that candidate is a strong candidate, their vote would never transfer. That candidate's probably not going to get eliminated in the simulated runoffs that occur. And so their vote wouldn't be transferring to somebody else anyway. So, yes, ideally everybody would rank all the candidates or all the candidates minus one. There's no point in ranking the last one, which does have a higher information threshold. And so there's actually a lot of interesting academic research about that. Some people maintain the rank choice is much more complex, leads to a lot more voter errors. Other people point to other data and say, no, it doesn't, and they point to polling data and say that people really prefer it. So that's actually, I would say, kind of an unsettled area in terms of academic research. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and the by district question, it's interesting because for instance, Fremont received a letter because it has, I think it was 12.4% Latino population, which is, even if that population lived entirely in one part of the city that could made its own district, that's just on the edge of being able to elect a candidate in that one district. And yet Fremont's really much more homogeneous than this. But the California Voting Rights Act does not require taking into account geographic distribution of whatever the protected group is. And so Fremont still had to go to district elections, even though it probably would not be effective in resulting in representation that was preferred by that group. And I don't know what the demographic distribution in Albany is in terms of race and ethnicity, but even if it's completely homogeneous, that's not protective against receiving one of these letters, interestingly.
Okay, thanks, Preston. We need to move on, but I believe we heard enough support from the board already to agendize this. This is just a staff report tonight, but we'll put it on the agenda so that we can discuss it and come back with an actual decision.
Would you like this as a review discussion, or?
I think it should be review and action so that we can maybe propose a resolution that we can pass to the city. But we can talk to you about the best way to go about that. Okay, thanks. Okay, that brings us to review and discussion. An academic calendar is first on the list.
Thank you. The purpose of this item is for the Board of Trustees to receive some information about the process for establishing an academic calendar so the board may engage in a discussion. And Cynthia Tia is here. She's our Director of Human Resources and will be providing this information before the board can start their discussion. Mrs. Atia.
I'm just here to give some information about some background information on the academic calendar and the process we've used in the past in order for you to have your discussion. There is an article in the teacher's contract that states that the district and employee groups shall meet annually to develop the school year calendar. All parties shall reach agreement by June 30th for a school calendar at least 1 year in advance. We also invite CSEA and SEIU to that. So that means that our 2018-19 calendar was approved last May 2017. The calendar we'll be working on next will be for 2019-20. We have not started that yet. So the process we've been using in the past is that we have a calendar committee was formed
There are representatives from the teachers group, the classified group, both SEIU and CSEA are invited, and we have 1 to 2 administrators and myself. We usually have an elementary principal and then a secondary principal. We're there to discuss the start date and end date of the school year, and of course in there we help decide where spring break is, winter break, how many days we're going to have for the Thanksgiving break. We look at when the professional development days are. I know that we could be more cognizant of that because I know there are some of our professional development days are close to some holidays that other districts and other cities have, such as Cesar Chavez or Indigenous Peoples holidays. After we also talk about, so every couple of years, because of the calendar, the start date keeps getting later and later. And so we have a discussion of, do we move it back? Do we move it forward? Which way do we go to kind of keep it in the middle ground? After we come to an agreement, sometimes we have 1 or 2 different calendars. The teachers then vote on it. And once it's voted on, then that's the calendar we will use for the 2 years ahead.
Thanks. Okay, Kim, I believe you're the person who asked that this be on the agenda. Do you want to jump in with some questions or comments?
Well, I do. I'm happy to see people in the audience that I think want to, put in their opinion. But I do have by email some opinions from people who couldn't be here. I'll start with Holly Taines-White, who writes, I wanted to throw in my 2 cents that the district needs to be much more aware of the Jewish holidays. Along with the academic calendar, the school sites need to be provided with guidance about the dates and instruction to avoid scheduling events and meetings on those holidays. For example, back to school night at the middle school was originally scheduled for Rosh Hashanah this year and only got moved because a parent brought this up. This shouldn't be the process. The district not tracking Jewish holidays has been a long-standing, ongoing issue for many years. So that's not, it's not exactly to the point that this committee decides, but it's part of a bigger issue and could be solved if the district were to implement a joint calendar visible to both school sites, people trying to schedule rooms, and to parents. I think that more issues like this would be caught more quickly if we had a calendar that encompassed all of the school sites and that was visible to parents on the website. But it also does speak to the fact that there should be some direction that goes to all school sites regarding this particular issue of the Jewish holidays. Then, let me move to this email from previous student board member Julia Greensfelder. And she writes, Julia always sort of spoke at length. I'll do this as quickly as I can. I think it is imperative that the schedule gets changed because it is simply not fair to students to have finals before winter break. Winter break is meant to serve as a time for students to spend time with their families and to decompress from the prior semester. Because finals are after, students are unable to do this. I have had many winter breaks where I was writing essays or studying during Christmas, resulting in my inability to spend quality time with family I see only once a year. Additionally, there is more instructional time after winter break. So even if I did decide to use this time to study for finals, I wouldn't have the materials necessary to do so. Teachers use this as an opportunity to give students huge projects that are due at the time of finals and are able to justify it because students have a 2-week break. I don't think it is right that there are expectations that students spend so much time doing schoolwork over this break.
Furthermore, large portions of college applications are due at the tail end of break, so it is difficult for seniors to juggle so much schoolwork and college applications. I literally had to miss out on every family gathering during my last winter break because of this. Lastly, there is a youth and government conference the weekend before finals. A high percentage of AHS is in this program, so it's significant. So there is no opportunity to study that weekend. Because of this, there's even more pressure to get all the studying done before this weekend, and lots of which takes place during winter break. Also, not sure this is specific to me or not, but I was unable to participate in orientation activities at WashU because AHS gets out so late, and I got last priority for signing up for my classes. Most students get out in late May or early June. Also, one last thing, there's literally nothing to do once AP tests are over. Teachers either don't teach during the last month of school because there is no point, or they assign projects that don't really enhance learning. If we started earlier, we could spend more time prepping for AP tests and less time goofing around for a month at the end. There isn't time enough with the current schedule to complete AP comparative government without a significant amount of summer homework. So that's Julia's perspective. I have one more letter I need to bring it up from Shelley Ball, a counselor at the high school, but I'd like to open it up to other people while I get that.
Okay, other board members? Yeah. Let's hear from our students.
Sure.
Vin.
So I was actually very delighted that Julia sent that email because that's something I was actually going to talk about. So I've heard from a lot of students that they wanted to move finals before winter break, specifically for the reasons described by Julia. A lot of us, instead of spending quality time with our family, you have to struggle to bring all our books and materials over to whatever, quality time we're supposed to be spending with our family, and we'll have to study over this break. And she's absolutely right. Projects are assigned during that time, which creates a lot of busy work for us that which we have to complete during this family time. I know that, at least for me, when I go somewhere with my family, I'll end up lugging, along with, my clothes and everything else, I'll end up lugging a bunch of textbooks and posters and poster-making materials because I'll have so many projects due right when I get back. I don't actually have any time to spend with my family. Rather, I'm dedicating that time to finish to studying for my finals. If finals were moved before winter break, that would give me a nice time to decompress right after finals and enjoy family time, which is what I believe winter break is for.
Thanks, Mahima.
So I know this is going to be brought up, hopefully, and it is a very controversial topic. But a lot of students have been advocating for a later start time, especially drawing comparisons to Berkeley High School's Monday late start. So on Mondays, there are staff meetings from 8 a.m. through 9:30, and then the first period starts at 9:57. And a lot of students have brought up that at our district we have block scheduling, and on Monday in particular you have all of your classes. So a lot of students have brought up the concern that there's a lot more work due on Monday, so having the morning to sleep in after a late night of homework, or maybe wake up early and do that homework, would be beneficial. But other than just Monday, if that's an option that we're looking into, I think sleep and mental health is extremely important. And I think that studies and research do show that schools that start later have tremendous beneficial impact. So maybe that's something we can discuss.
Thanks. Ross?
I think it's well worth thinking on the issue that we've inherited lots of stuff that we may or may not need. The idea that you have a summative final at the end of things, and only then, as opposed to having tests before Christmas and then what's addressed after that is new, because it's the remaining 20% of a class and it doesn't result in, in January or February some monster final. We could separate this into the days that are most convenient to have kids in school, and then the ways in which we can educate and test, and they don't have to be built around 2 semesters necessarily. I have heard that there is guidance that classes shouldn't have any more than 20% of their grade in the final, but that isn't observed universally either. If there are classes out there that are having finals in excess of 20%, that might be something to address too. So I would say, relax some of these variables that we're taking as fixed constants. We don't necessarily have to have 2 semesters with 20% or 40% finals at the end of them. If we can move the ideas and the materials and the knowledge into people's heads and test them as we go. I'm also very interested in hearing what we come up with over the coming years, say, in terms of mastery-based grading. Very good to evaluate someone as whether or not they've absorbed the material and not how did you do in week 2 or week 6 or, God forbid, we'll test you on everything at the end. I'd rather see us more flexible in how we ensure that the students learn, and we should be less concerned about the specific dates.
Thanks, Charlie.
So the issue that both Julia and Navin have brought up, namely that winter break is not actually a break for our high school students, is something that has come up and been discussed at each and every board meeting each year for well over 10 years. And there's always somebody, and that somebody is often me, who says, okay, I understand you worked out this calendar, it was negotiated, and okay, I'll vote for it this year, but next year, why not bring us something different? And so next year never happens. Well, it does happen, but the something different doesn't happen. So I'm not sure where we're going wrong in the process, but I have a suggestion, and my suggestion is, if this is a negotiated item, which it is, then perhaps the board needs to have an agenda item at some point and provide some direction to staff as to what the board would like to take into those negotiations. That's what we normally do going into negotiations. The board provides some guidance as to what the board would like staff to negotiate on behalf of the public, and then we go from there. So that's my suggestion, is we agendize that at some point.
I'd like to second that suggestion, and therefore we'll put it on the agenda, and point out that the board is the representative of the community. Parents and students have not traditionally had any input into these negotiations, and the way they get input into these negotiations is through the board, and this is supposed to be a negotiation between the district and the unions, not dictated by the unions. And, it's true what Charlie says. All the time I've been on the board, this has come up almost every year. And it's never been part of the negotiations as far as I can tell. So I just want to second that and agree with what Charlie said. Jacob?
So there's no academic calendar committee?
Cynthia, do you want to answer the question about who you work with on your committee?
Yes, annually we have an academic calendar committee.
But who is on it?
Students and parents are invited to be on that committee?
No.
Who's invited on the committee?
The people invited on the committee are the representatives of the union, the SEIU, ATA, and CSEA, and usually 2 administrators, one from elementary, one from secondary, and myself.
So maybe you might want to invite people from the public and the students on the committee in the future as well.
I'd have to check with that because it is negotiations. We are negotiating with the bargaining units. Perhaps we can get input. I don't know if they are eligible to be in the meeting. I'd have to find out about that.
You could create a separate committee where you ask for parent input and student input, right?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
You might want to, because the way it's kind of being stated is that there's no way to get input from the community and the students, and I don't agree with that. There's other ways to do it.
Agreed. Do you want to let her talk, or do you want to?
Go ahead, Desiree. I do have the email from Shelley Ball that I want to get back to at some point.
Good evening. So I just wanted to make the quick point that once you open the door for Rosh Hashanah, then that means you open up the door for Kwanzaa, Ramadan, etc. This is a sanctuary city, so you have to be mindful. And when we're talking about a calendar, I know what's not negotiated, and they are those celebrated holidays that are on the regular calendar. So if you go into a calendar negotiation and you don't have an actual calendar that lists those specific holidays in it, which I'm sure you guys do, those are the things that the principals, et cetera, and that staff that are in there should be, pretty much culturally aware that these types of things are happening. Also, I even think Board Member Clark mentioned the La Dia de dos Muertos. Even that is, culturally celebrated. So, I mean, everybody wants to talk about, going all these trainings and everything, but, if you don't know stuff that's already on the calendar and you're making stuff, or whomever's planning items that are clearly on a regular calendar, not just AUSD, and you're not mindful, then, you just may run into the issue that people just may not show up, and have to reschedule. So, I mean, I think, you guys are probably doing that, but again, not, saying anything against just one or the other, but, once you mention that, you have to think of it at large for everybody. And maybe they may not be able to make it due to those religious, obligations, and have to be scheduled and not treated any differently because they are not, able to attend if it cannot be rescheduled or moved if it, is just pinpointed down. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Kim.
Okay, so this is from Shelley Ball, who's a counselor at the high school and a member of the Wellness Committee. She was part of a group that worked with Stanford's Challenge Success program a few years ago on wellness issues, particularly trying to reduce stress and anxiety at the high school. So Shelley says, moving semester finals to the period before December break is widely known to be an intervention that is in the best interest of student well-being. Universities have recognized this, and many have moved their finals to mid-December in the last decade. I do not believe we need to move the calendar by many days to do this. Stanford's Challenge Success is a 10-year-old project led by Stanford's Education School that consults with school districts nationwide to join the best in educational and adolescent wellness research with school practice. Challenge Success recommends moving finals as one of the several innovations aimed at reducing student stress while maintaining academic excellence. The argument that goes that students both get a real break, which is critically important for wellness, and are better able to demonstrate what they have learned when they have a cumulative assessment prior to a 2-week break. One question arises, does moving finals require schools to start several weeks earlier in August? I think not. 2 other options exist. It might be possible to simply have one longer and one shorter semester and only shift the school calendar by a week rather than 2 or 3. Or we could even keep the calendar as is by doing the following. Currently, we have very few single semester classes, and those we have are all paired with another semester-long class, e.g. Gov, Econ, Comparative Government, and World Religions, and the Venture Program paired class. Let's take our seniors as an example, half of whom take Gov first, and the other half of whom take Econ first. First semester Gov or Econ class could end in December before break, and then when students switch to the other in January, the first 3 weeks of the semester could be an integrated unit created by Gov and Econ teachers that would bring together themes and principles from the standards of both courses. All students would take that 2 to 3 week unit, but some would have it as part of Gov and others as part of Econ. I researched 2 schools who have recently moved their school calendars, Piedmont and Los Gatos High School.
Kim, excuse me. Is this much longer?
No, this is like 3 more lines.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. The schools have chosen significantly early starts in mid-August, which is a third option, but not necessarily for us. I also noticed that neither has semesters of equal length. I believe our most important commitment should be to moving finals, a move that is clearly in the best interest of our students, their learning, and their wellness.
Okay, we're already running behind. I see 6 people waiting to speak. And we're significantly off topic because we're supposed to be talking about the process by which the academic calendar is set, not the academic calendar itself. And so those of you who want to speak, I ask a couple of things. One, try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If somebody else has already made your point, please just say, I agree with them, and don't make it again. And if you want to talk about the academic calendar itself, like that letter that Kim just read, that would be better kept for when we're actually discussing the academic calendar rather than the process. So it would be better if you addressed the process by which we're creating the calendar rather than the actual start times or times of finals, because that's not really what we're supposed to be talking about tonight.
But Paul, my impression was that this is the community's only opportunity to get this input in.
That is very much the point.
Yeah.
That the community has not had the opportunity.
Yeah.
And what I hope will come out of this discussion tonight, and I think has already because we've agreed to put it on the agenda, is coming up with a way for the community to have input on the calendar. So I'm hoping, because we have a lot more to do tonight, and we've got at least a half an hour worth of comments up here if everyone takes their 3 minutes. So I'm hoping we can restrict the conversation to process and have a longer conversation at the appropriate time about the calendar itself. I'm just hoping. I'm not going to stop anybody. They get their 3 minutes, but that's my request. So let's start.
So I just want to be able to talk about really quickly, as a parent and attending these meetings since the school year started, you guys are going down that path again of trying to pit what's already been negotiated under a collective bargaining agreement. I completely agree with all the community, and as a community member and a parent of a 7th grader at AMS, the calendar is a little that can be worked on, but there's things that you also have to fundamentally respect, and that is what's been negotiated. I would invite you to create, as school board members, a committee that would encourage community members to have their say, and also see if not for it to be negotiated, but for it to be discussed and give these suggestions and allow to inform the community when is the next opening of their next contract so that we can have this kind of language and these types of discussions. But I don't want for our school board to fall again down that road where it kind of becomes us versus our teachers versus the para support that we absolutely need. So please don't go down that road. Create a committee that will actually can contribute to that conversation, even if they're not part of the bargaining committee, but allow the community and the families to give input. But don't turn us against each other. That's all I ask. And I'm not going to give any details about the calendar, but it's stressful what's going on with our kids already and the amount of work that they're expected to do in order to be competitive. I applaud our children, but it's just a lot. And it's not just the kids, it's our teachers too that are being asked to do all of these incredible things with the amount of time that they have in the school year. So I'm just asking to take this input, but don't pit us against each other. Thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Olga for bringing that up, because just a little while earlier I was kind of recommending the same thing, that we get a committee together. And it did seem to me like it was a little anti-union the way it was kind of presented, you know, as far as imposed on you, you know. So we might want to be a little bit more inclusive to all of our employees.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Shannon Huffaker. I'm a parent of a 1st and 3rd grader at Marin. I'm not going to use my full 3 minutes. I just wanted to say, when you're talking about the calendar, I think that I'm a nurse practitioner, and I believe very strongly in looking at what the evidence is showing us, and the evidence is very clear. The CDC does not come out with recommendations without a real serious look at the evidence. And the school start time issue in middle school and high school, I don't have middle schoolers or high schoolers, but it's very compelling. It's real, and it should be taken into account when you're talking about whatever this committee is you're going to form. You need to be looking at the medical and social evidence that we have about school start times, because it's very clear. I also would urge you to, whenever this gets negotiated, to put on the table again the issue about early bird, late bird, Wednesday schedule, school conferences. As you know, the majority of families in this district are two-income working families, and this is not the 1960s, and that schedule is extremely challenging on parents and on families who have to work out childcare in the younger grades. So those are my two requests whenever this does actually get discussed.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Taya Grange-Isaacson. I'm a parent of 2 students in Albany schools. I also have recently completed a PhD, which had a research interest in sleep, so I just want to weigh in on that as well. And I took off work to be here, so I apologize that I can't say this at a more appropriate meeting. But I also want to reiterate the importance of sleep. I have an article and a study that I made a copy of if anyone wants to see, that just reiterates the importance of start time. Economists just looked at this, and we're fighting kids' natural biorhythms by having a late start time. It's not about activities. We're choosing to have chronically sleep-deprived children, which is linked to psychopathology, stress, depression, suicidality, learning problems, ADHD, as well as illness. They're more likely to miss school, and we lose money as a district if students can't be there. They did a study where they delayed start time by 30 minutes. That is the equivalent of adding 2 full months to the school year, because the students have more attention span and more capacity to learn. So even with less days, they're getting more learning in, which also equates to a lifetime earning increase of $17,000 per student. There's no economic reason to be starting as early as we're starting, and there's no learning reason to be doing it. So I agree that whenever this gets brought up, if that could be duly considered. And then I also just want to support the last speaker in terms of conference schedule. It's at least 6 weeks of the year that families have to grapple with if you have an elementary student and a middle school student, where your start time is different, your end time is different, and it's so stressful on families to try and figure out, like, what are we doing today? What time does it start today? I think our teachers work incredibly hard, and it's a balance of how do you make sure teachers don't have to do too much, but parents don't have to do too much as well? And can we look at best practices in other districts where maybe it's 1 day off of school, maybe it's 1 late evening, and if it's 14 hours that you need for those conferences, how do we do it so it's not 6 weeks out of the school year? Thank you for your time. Can I leave these articles?
I'd like to have that, please. Thank you. If you can give it to Ms. Manabusen, then I'll make sure that the board gets copies of that research. Thank you, and congratulations on your PhD.
Hi, I'm Tamara Keller again, and I'm going to also keep it super short. I want to echo what everybody else has said, that the community needs a format to discuss the calendar and have whatever appropriate feedback inserted into this process. And I'm going to put one plead on the conference discussion. I completely agree with Taya that the amount of days is so hard to juggle. I happen to have 2 kids in elementary school right now, but going into middle school next year. And the amount of time that the conferences take up, the number of days that alternate schedule is really tough. I love the late bird schedule, but man, it's like 6 weeks. Yeah, it's really a bummer. I also plead that when this gets discussed, that somebody looks at when daylight savings time starts and ends, because both the fall and the spring conference schedules happen right when daylight savings time changes. And it's not as big of a deal in the fall right now because we fall back, but in the spring, that's like asking my late bird kids, which we're talking about 5 to 9-year-olds, to not only go to school an hour earlier than they're used to for the majority of the week, but then you've got another hour that you've sprung forward. So that's like asking them to go 2 hours in the morning. Give us at least a week to adjust to that new time before we add conferences into all of this. So that's it.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Yee. I have a third grader at Ocean View Elementary who's very eager for me to leave. So I'm going to speak quite quickly. I'm here on the school start times because there was no other forum that I knew of to speak of. I'm not adding to what was said before. 3 succinct pieces of information, though, that I do want to add because I don't want to repeat. One is that the American Academy of Pediatricians has a lot of evidence, a policy statement on their site. If you go to their site, you will find a lot of studies speaking to what other speakers have said. The second point is that a lot of school districts across the country have not gone to later start times, in part because of expenses. And a lot of those expenses have to do with acquiring more school buses and acquiring drivers when all the schools in the district start. That's not really an issue here in Albany. So that the expense isn't so much an issue. Third, I just wanted to say that in SB 328, which was a bill in California that was turned down, it would have actually imposed an 8:30 or later start time in all California school districts. But it was turned down not necessarily substantively, but because of the belief that this is a decision that should be made at the local school level, not imposed upon school districts. So here's a chance for the local school district to make that decision. One thing going to the process, if there's a commission or a committee, just to also think about how that representation would work. I mean, there are these forums, there are things going on in the city, like for parents to really, if you're wanting a wide representation of parent input, to think through how that will work if there's yet another special committee to deal with another distinct matter. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pareen Shah. I have 2 elementary students at Cornell. I'll be very quick. First, I agree with all the previous comments about the conference schedule, and please revisiting that because it causes havoc with all the childcare. And secondly, if we could ensure that the school year starts on a Monday. It did this year, but in previous year it hasn't. Whenever there's a partial week, that also wreaks havoc with childcare. When school starts in the middle of the week, you have a couple days, you've got to figure out what to do with the kids. So if possible, if school can always start, the school year can start on a Monday, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe we have 2 separate topics. I don't think school start times are part of the calendar negotiation. Am I right?
It could be part of negotiations if it is a change in working conditions.
Right, but it's not part of the calendar.
Well, but it could be because it could result in a different number of days or,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to agendize school start time discussion as a separate item. That's what I'm suggesting. But we also need to agendize a way to get information to the board, and Jacob has suggested a committee, which sounds like a good idea. So we need to agendize a discussion of creating a committee with all the advice we've had tonight and how that should be done, to advise the board so that the board can advise the superintendent before negotiations, and we have no intention of trying to make this retroactive. Things that have already been negotiated have been negotiated, that's finished. There's no intention on the board to try to undo things that have already been negotiated. We're looking forward to future negotiations.
I anticipated that we would need to have these discussions, so I have already placed on the governance calendar previously for the November 28th board meeting 2 topics. One is academic calendar, as 2 of 2, and secondary school start times is what I also had on the calendar. So this has already been placed on there, and if we need to add more, we can.
Well, we need to talk about a calendar advisory committee, so
Yes.
We'll need to put that on
Thank you.
at some point.
So that will be part of the discussion.
There will be a discussion.
A
We'll
discussion.
have a discussion on that.
Thank you.
Specifically, yes. Good, so let's move on to facilities projects.
Could I just quickly thank all of the community members that did come out? It's so hard to leave your family, especially those of you that have young children, and make it to a board meeting. And we really appreciate you being here and giving your input. Thank you.
Yes, I second that. Thanks for coming out. Okay, facilities.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard, who's going to give us an update on facilities timing and sequencing, and this is a review and discussion item.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. In the board packet, there was a backup that described some of the factors and provided some background, and so I just created a short presentation to provide more context for members of the audience. So just a brief history. In 2012, the state of California had the Division of State Architect look at schools that may have be at risk of seismic deficiency based on the year that they were built. And so we had our own structural engineers do a comprehensive study and found that both Marin Elementary and Ocean View Elementary had those seismic deficiencies. And so in 2014, we developed a facilities master plan. In 2015, the City of Albany developed a 20-year general plan. That general plan noted an expectation for population growth. Population growth would then also impact the Albany School District. 2016, bond measures B&E passed, and this year we're beginning the Albany Middle School Annex. And so with the facilities master plan developed in 2014, there is a need just a few months ago to realign that facilities master plan with our current needs. And so we're right now focused on what's in progress, which is we had a groundbreaking of the Albany Middle School Annex yesterday, and this item is focusing on what's in the pending item, the pending section of the Facilities Master Plan, which notes Marin Elementary, Ocean View Elementary, the Albany High School addition, and district office. As noted in the backup, the district office is on leased property with UC Berkeley, and so we're trying to work with them on a more permanent solution. So some of the things that should be considered, or some of the things that we need to consider when we're looking at developing a plan for the remaining projects is ever since the structural engineer reports for Marin and Ocean View Elementary were received, there has been a lot of questions from parents in the community and staff about how are we going to address it, where are students going to go during construction. We have seen a decline over the past 5 years of elementary students by almost 200, and some of that is due to that unknown, that answering the question of when are we going to address Marin and Ocean View and where are they going to go while we address it. And I just want to provide a asterisk when I'm going to talk about a theoretical option is that any option for temporary housing is going to need to go through a comprehensive community vetting process with staff, parents, and the community. And so what I'm going to share is essentially an option that solves some of the goals and issues that have been heard over the past few years. And so some of the goals for temporary housing is trying to avoid the use of busing and transportation, essentially keeping students in Albany, and avoiding what has occurred in the past regarding a very early session and then a new group being taught in the late afternoons. It gets it's very complicated. It really messes up with family time. We're talking about start times, and this would be very complicated. The other thing to keep in mind is that we have a limited number of bond dollars. We want to use those bond dollars as effectively as possible. And so using those for actual buildings that we're going to use long-term is optimal. And so what has occurred in the past has also been what's been known as portable high. And when the Albany High School was rebuilt, that requires a lot of money to purchase portables, develop a site, remove portables, and make it into a usable space afterwards, after the temporary housing is addressed. And so that would be several millions of dollars that would be used for a temporary solution. And so one idea that kind of addresses those items is the need to, with the Albany Middle School Annex being built, and then if we focus on the Albany High School addition as being the second project, that would build capacity across the district. And depending on enrollment, we would be able to kind of do some shifting of grade levels. So with the high school addition being built, we would then have capacity to house the 8th grade at the Albany High School, 4th and 5th grade at the middle school, and then split K-3 among 2 elementary schools as one gets rebuilt. There would be a lot of community discussions to really weigh various options and make a decision. And so what's important tonight is having a timeline in place so that those discussions can be firm and it won't become theoretical. Because a discussion on temporary housing for next year is, that conversation looks different than if it's a temporary housing solution 5 years from now. It's different people, different concerns, and different factors. And so what would be needed is, and then I could open it up to questions and comments, is that if the high school becomes the next project in the pipeline, I would then need to re-engage with the Albany High School design team to finalize plans there, to make sure that the current plans are to make sure that the work that has already been done is usable, and to see if there's any factors that have changed where the plans need to be updated. We would then need to work on selecting a contractor for that project, and due to the significant disruption that would occur with removing an amphitheater at the high school, that work would need to be done during a school year, or during the summer. So we would need to develop plans to schedule that removal beginning in June to ensure that it doesn't impact the normal instructional year. And over the next few months, we would then look at determining whether Marin Elementary or Ocean View Elementary becomes the first elementary school to be reconstructed. There's a lot of pros and cons and conversations on which elementary school, and so by having a timeline in place, then we would be able to have firmer discussions on which elementary school. And so with that, I would open it up to the board for questions.
Okay. Ross?
A bunch of things. So one of the things when you talked about the issue of busing, et cetera, it's hugely important to know that would be, if we did busing, we'd be spending money out of the general fund, not out of the bond funds. So if we're talking about cutting, say, staff, teachers, et cetera, because we can't sustain the spending we're doing, That would take an additional gouge out of what we're spending on core programs and in the classrooms. So I have been maybe the more skeptical of the board on the issue of the elementary schools from the get-go, and I think there's a very real chance, given what we know about budgets and history, et cetera, that if we prioritize one school over the other, we don't get to school number 2. I think that's quite a realistic possibility, given that we're paying for it all with our own bond monies. The state probably won't give us a dime, or we certainly can't bet on that. So I am absolutely prepared to be rethinking this as we go forward and say, let's do what makes absolute sense and let's react as circumstances permit. If we also, if we went the route of sort of shoehorning students in and shuffling things around, that ties our hands on things like admitting out-of-district enrollment. We can't, or if we're surprised by significant increases in enrollment. If UC turns around and says, well, we'd actually like more families with kids at UC Village, we could see a 200-student deficit turn into a 200-student surplus, and that would be quite a shock and surprise. Also worth noting that there's nothing here about the siting of the district office, and that's a can we keep on kicking down the road. All that said, I think we've got this wonderful opportunity to build on the San Gabriel site that we're taking advantage of. It's not disrupting anybody else. It's usable space. If it ends up housing an alternative elementary school, we need the space. We'll build that space. We've got the space. I don't see a reason not to build on the high school, given that it is also buildable space, though I would strongly urge the student board members to see about getting as much student participation as possible. We're talking about the AMS amphitheater. Things happen there. You have meetings there. Graduation spills out onto it. Make sure that what is left when we build out that campus has the spaces that students need that are not classroom spaces, but are community spaces. So I'll yet again put a big marker of saying I worry about the elementary school premise. I don't see any reason not to proceed with McGregor's or the San Gabriel as we had in the high school as a next step, because it is space we could use.
Thanks. Anyone else? Charlie.
So I appreciate the work that the steering committee has done. Thank you for bringing us these creative ideas. It's why we created a steering committee. So we're already seeing the fruits of people sitting down and thinking through some of these difficult questions. I particularly liked the possibilities that when we do the elementary school or schools, that it may be possible to do so without students leaving Albany and without busing anyone. So, and without spending money we don't have. So all of those are, I think, really good directions that the committee has gone. It sounds like you would like some feedback from us on the next steps. So I'll just weigh in and say I'm comfortable with the steps that you've proposed here. I'm not sure if we need to actually agendize that as a formal board action at some point, but I appreciate the work you've done, and I would support the direction you're going.
Others? Kim?
Alan, could you go back to the slide that has the plan? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the alternative to this, or one alternative would be to, say, rent an empty elementary school in some nearby community and bus our students there. Can you give just a basic ballpark estimate of what that would cost in terms of leasing fees and bus fees? Now, I think that the lease would come out of the bond money, but the bus would come out of general fund, right?
Correct. A couple of years ago with a neighboring district, they were leasing space and they were being charged about $500,000 per year just to lease the space. For busing, well, and so that would probably be a lot higher now. But then for busing, if we bused all the students in one elementary school to another site, it would be in the range of $150,000 per year.
Okay, so those are good figures to have in mind. What I like about this is that it keeps Albany kids in Albany. And I think it's a very creative solution to use the 2 elementary schools that are not under construction to house the primary grades, and then to shift things around given the expanded capacity at the middle school and at the high school, so that we can keep everybody here and keep everyone on a normal sort of school schedule rather than having that morning session and afternoon session of 2 different sets of kids that you mentioned. So I appreciate the work that went into coming up with this creative plan. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? I'd like to second what Charlie said. Thank you for the work that you've done, and it looks like the direction you've been going is good. Got a lot more work to do. Other than that, does anyone in the audience have questions or comments on this facilities? Okay, then let's.
You could just answer yes or no, or you don't know. From the model that is right there, when he said the temporary housing, so that would be portables added to whatever existing schools?
No.
Okay. When you changed the grades on there, did you or whomever consider the maturity level of those grades, 4th and 5th, moving with 6th and 7th? There's a little thing, some kids just aren't as mature. So was that taken, in account? And because you would have children that are used to being perhaps at the elementary school, are you going to have even the money, now considering the situation, to have staff there that would be able to handle any, situation that may arise?
It would need to be further researched.
Okay. And then along with maturity level, did you think about any peer pressure? And so that goes into the same thing with staff, because you have a 4th grader versus a 7th grader, the mind level's different, and even though they may not be on the yard at the same time, they could be sharing the same teachers and or see the same people. So that should be a consideration. You don't have to answer yes or no on that. And also factoring in social emotional, and that goes for the high school also. I don't know if and when I have an 8th grader, if they're going to be ready to be in there with a 12th grader. I mean, there's a little thing called Instagram that happened in this district, and I would be really, unhappy if you had an 8th grader being, involved in around, unmature, right, higher grade levels. So fine about budget and bond and all that, but there are children, that are going to be there, and are they ready? Are they going to be ready? And are you going to have the staff, and the curriculum actually in place in order to pretty much, take care of that you don't have these same situations repeating over and over again? You don't have to answer that.
Thank you. Ross?
And to amplify a little on what Desiree has just said, and to talk again about sort of thinking outside the box or relaxing some of our assumptions, there are a lot of other variations doing something like this. So you could actually have some primary grades at the same site as the high school, say. The state of New York has had a trend to remove middle schools in favor of K-8s. We have the idea that we've got 3 elementaries, a middle school and a high school and an alternative high school and an ACC, but there's nothing that says we couldn't somewhat throw this up in the air and say, yeah, but if we had a K-8 school in addition to these elementaries, et cetera, we could be a lot more flexible. We're a small district. We're not like Berkeley High and having schools within schools, but there isn't actually any reason you couldn't be a lot more creative in how you slice and dice, with attention to the idea that, yeah, you probably don't want to throw in 8th graders with the high schoolers. I think that's a fine thought. So, let's be very flexible in how we think of, we've got space, we've got students, let's match where we can the needs we have.
Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for finally starting this discussion, because I do think that it's way overdue in terms of the community. I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, a little bit like Desiree, in that I have concerns about this plan. I definitely am not into the morning afternoon session. I don't think anyone is. I think that's extremely disruptive. But I hope that it's mostly the finances that are motivating this and not some of the more sort of upsetting things I've heard about people being afraid to be bused to Emeryville or things like that, because I personally find that to be an offensive motivation. But I also, I am a Marin parent. I will be affected by whatever happens, and I would advocate that you consider like affecting one school at a time, my school, my family, and not the entire district with this plan. You're talking about crowding up, disrupting every single school in the district instead of just one school for, let's face it, it's going to be 2 years. At least I don't think anybody really thinks this is going to happen in a year, the rebuilds. So instead, you're talking about 4+ years of disrupting the entire district. And I also am really have similar concerns about having, a high school that is crowded now with 4 grades, suddenly having 5 grades, and having 8th graders in with seniors, with 18-year-olds. I think that's not appropriate. I'm concerned about 4th and 5th graders on campus with the middle schooler as well. And I'm also especially concerned about breaking up a school or the schools that are going to be, I think the PTA, the staff, the principals at these schools have put a lot of work into having a community, and I really am concerned that you're going to break up what is a really good school spirit at Marin or at Ocean View in splitting these things up. So I would not say that the parent feedback is uniform, that we're all afraid of our kids going out of the district, and would rather, the finances are one thing, and it sounds like the busing is expensive, but $150,000 is not going to make or break the general fund probably. But I would just say that there are voices out there that are not afraid to go to an empty school in Emeryville for a year or two rather than disrupting the entire district, which, by any of our kids will be disrupted at some point. So this is, not about just not my kid. I think we need to think it through.
Just 2 quick points. One is, as someone who went to a high school in 7th grade and 8th grade, it is actually wonderful to skip middle school. And I find it one of my great blessings in life that I got to go to the high school when I was in 7th grade. I also think, I hear a lot of concerns about that. I found it incredibly helpful to see much older students and better examples. I'm not sure that being surrounded by 13-year-olds is actually the best thing. So I say move them down to 7th grade and send them all to Albany High. The second point is just that I hear the concern about disrupting everyone instead of just one school at a time being disrupted and one set of families at a time. I also think, though, that there has been a big push in Albany to have equality and have everyone kind of going through things together. And I really appreciate that about Albany and this school district. And so I guess I'm more in favor of everyone suffers together, and I think we can actually have a lot of good community spirit as a result of that, instead of having one school suffer and one group of parents suffer, and especially if there's not going to be a second school. That doesn't seem to be the sort of Albany equality that I like. So that's my 2 cents.
I just wanted to voice my support for a plan that keeps all the kids in Albany. I'm a city planner, so I think about how cities work, and the idea of putting our kids on a bus. I have no problems with my kids going to school in Emeryville or Oakland. I have no fear for their safety. I just don't want to put my kids in transit for 40 minutes to an hour on a good day. You know, that's, you know, if you getting to Emeryville is not, it can be challenging with traffic. So I like the idea of keeping everybody in Albany. When B&E was before the voters, I walked 16 miles dropping flyers. I was very supportive of these bonds. And what I heard people question was, what is going to happen to the kids? You know, are they going to be bused? And that was sort of something that I heard, that people did not want kids bused just because it just adds to their day, which is already long for a lot of kids. So anything, and I also like the idea of sharing the pain for everybody. So anything that keeps all the kids in the district, I support.
Thanks, Kim.
First, I wanted to ask, is there an empty candidate school around that might be available?
No, there were a few options, but those have all been kind of taken up for the next 5 years.
Okay, so for the next 5 years, there's nothing available nearby in a reasonable bus distance?
Correct.
Okay, and then thanks for that information. Then I just wanted to say that I love the idea of having, you know, we might have a student who went to Marin for K and First, and then went to Cornell for a couple of years, and then moves over to Ocean View before going to the middle school. I like the idea that we might generate a group of students that are everything. They're a dolphin, they're a coyote, they're you know, because everybody comes together in middle school. You know, they're all cobras in 6th grade. You know, and there's been this thing about, you know, we have 3 distinct elementary schools, and they do have their own spirits and their own traditions and their own PTA, but having the opportunity to have some kids that somehow have encompassed all of that and have gotten those experience. You know, I know that's a lot of transitions, but I also think that there's a beauty in that, and there's an inclusivity that I think could be a positive.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, I think we need to move on. We've got a lot more to get through tonight. Thank you very much for that presentation. We have review and action items. I think the first several we can get through pretty quickly. The first is moved from the consent calendar. It's a memorandum of understanding with Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Services. I pulled this from the consent calendar because this MOU and the accompanying letter have no non-discrimination clause. And it's our board policy that we have non-discrimination clauses in all our contracts. Our superintendent has already notified Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Services of this and sent them a copy of our non-discrimination clause, which they're passing past their lawyers. So I just suggest that we table this and bring it back once we've had a response from them, and then we can vote on it based on whether they've added a non-discrimination clause or not.
On consent, then, because it originated as...
It can come back on consent if they've added the clause, and if they haven't added the clause, then I'm going to pull it from consent because I'm going to vote no. But,
so you're looking for a motion to table?
That's right.
All right, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, appointment of a board policy committee.
Thank you, President Black. At their last board meeting, the board discussed the board policy committee, and I'm going to turn this over to Director Marie Williams, who will give us an update. And actually, this is a review and action item. We do have the members of this committee. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. This evening, Governing Board, we are asking you to approve the members of the Board Policy Committee so that we can begin our work reviewing, revising, and monitoring several of our board policies. Our board policy committee is composed right now of 2 board members, myself, the superintendent, student board member Silwall, Darren McNally, a secondary administrator, and then also 2 parents. So would request that you approve the committee so that we can begin our work with scheduling and prioritizing and moving forward.
Okay, does anyone need to see the list or discuss this? Jacob?
I want to make a motion. Yeah. So I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of the District Board Policy Committee.
Okay.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, through that one. Independent contractor agreement with Consolidated Engineering Labs for special testing services for the middle school annex project.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. With the grand opening of the Albany Middle School, or with the groundbreaking ceremony of the Albany Middle School Annex yesterday, we are bringing forward a contract with Consolidated Engineering Laboratories. They would be the special. They would provide special testing services for the project. They would work and coordinate with the inspector of record, the structural engineer of record, the school district, and the contractor to test not only the concrete, but also steel and anchors, and ensure that what is being installed meets all building code and state requirements.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments on this one? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, independent contractor agreement with Dining by Design for Food Services Department.
And I'm going to turn this over to Chief Business Official Alan Gard.
Thanks, Superintendent Williams. The food service program is currently self-sufficient, and in order to help ensure that it maintains its self-sufficiency, we want to look at how meals are provided at the Albany High School. Typically, high schools with open campuses have much lower participation rates than the other schools because there's more options, especially in a city of Albany when there's millions of options and great places to eat. And so what this contract would do is work closely with the food service director, Chloe Hoffman, as well as the high school students to really figure out what it is that they're looking for and see how the food service program could meet their needs.
Okay. Questions?
Very quickly, it says on the financial information that this is Fund 13, Cafeteria Fund. I just wanted to clarify, is this a special fund? Is this outside the general budget?
Correct. This is, with the food service program, they're specifically a contained program. And so it's accounted for differently, which is accounted for in Fund 13.
As long as it stays in the black, it doesn't cost anything out of the general fund. If it went into the red, we would have to make up the difference out of the general fund.
I see. Thank you.
Hi, I just have a couple questions about this contract here. Is the goal is it to increase the amount of money that the cafeteria is taking in, or I'm just kind of unclear as to what the goal is of this.
Sure.
Should we have Chloe answer that?
It's okay, I got it. It's to increase the participation from students and staff, specifically for the high school, so that with the increased participation, it increases the amount of revenues and increases the increases the amount of money that would go into the food service program, and so that would help ensure that it maintains its self-sufficiency and stays away from the general fund.
And are they also going to be looking at increasing the number of our students who get free and reduced lunch to participate in the program?
This contract, no. This contract would specifically focus on what students are looking for and develop ideas on how to meet those needs.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Jacob?
Yeah, I was looking through it and I was just curious is why we need to hire an outside company to spend $4,000 to do something that I would think the students could possibly do themselves. I mean, starting off, you started off saying it's an open campus, so that probably gives you a pretty good idea why a lot of students aren't eating at school. So it just seems like an extremely high amount for what we're going to get in return, you know?
So the food service director has been working for the school district for a number of years. One of the processes that he has in place is meeting with students, going to schools, going to classrooms, and really testing out foods, seeing what they like, what they don't like. And what this contract would do is really provide some more out-of-the-box thinking on how to really get to the students and meet those needs that are beyond the time and ability of the food service director.
Yeah, but if you look at page 205, where it talks about the table of objectives and the deliverables and all that, some of the hours that are attached to some of the work that is involved, I would question the amount of hours that this proposal is stating some of these things are going to take. So it just seems like an awful lot to find out why students aren't eating at campus.
Of course, I have 2 elementary school kids. I know that in the past, the children have gone up to the principal and specifically stated, we don't like this particular food because. Also, I don't know if the food director or how much they're actually getting, but here's the thought, hair nets. Those are not worn by the staff at the elementary school, and they need to be. And that is the main turnoff, of course, for children when they get hair in their food and they have to return it back, and it pretty much grosses them out, and then they don't want to get that same particular lunch again. So little things like that. I don't know if that's the same thing at the other sites, but it's something that definitely should have already been, addressed. But since, the contract was up here, just thought that I'd mention it because you should probably not necessarily go back to, old, and instinctive, ways of how they used to serve food in the cafeteria. It's fine coming up with nice, cuisines and stuff, but you got to get back down to the basics of, how do you cut the line so that the chicken nuggets that are very popular, the line's not going outside of the door and the kids don't have enough time to even eat lunch. So, little things like that you should probably fix before you start giving somebody $4,000 to $5,000. Again, hiring these outside consultants, come, take our money, and then don't really solve the problems that certain people in the district need to be solving themselves. Thank you.
Charlie.
So I have a question because I thought this proposal was limited to Albany High School. Am I not correct about that?
I think you're correct about that.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Paul, I'm the food service director for the district. So this proposal is specifically looking at the high school. That doesn't mean that any of these concepts or anything that we learn through this process wouldn't be applied to any of the other sites. So in terms of this person coming and working with us, certain people have expertise about behavior or way of, for instance, we're going to be conducting student interviews and looking at the way that the cafeteria is lit. And so it's not necessarily just about the food and what they want to eat. So this person came when I first talked to them, and he said to me, could we turn these lights off? And I said, well, okay, sure. And then we'll open the curtains. Just one thing very quickly. And this girl walked in, and she goes, oh my gosh, it's like not depressing in here. like right, that one little thing that happened right there that seemed so obvious when it happened, And so having an outside perspective, having someone come in also who has the time to really ferret out what's going on, to make the dining experience, it's not only about participation, but just making it a better place to be and trying to get more students to stay on campus. There's a lot of studies that show kids who stay on campus do better in school. So it's not just about the participation. Of course, we want to increase that so we can generate more income, which then goes back into the program. So that's where we're at with that. Any other questions for me?
Mahima?
Oh, I had a comment, but
Go ahead.
one of my favorite things about going to Albany High School is being surrounded by individuals who are very aware about the place that they're in and who are very mindful of the things that are going on and want to contribute and make it better than it already was. I think it's always great to have a fresh pair of eyes come in and help us, but I think that there's a lot that can come from just talking to students. I think there's nothing beats the experience that students already have. I think there's no better guidance than students who actually dine. And I think that just talking to a few students firsthand would be a great idea. I think recently, one of the concerns that a lot of people have is the muffins are the best thing during break, and break is 15 minutes. And if you're on the 3rd floor and you want to get a muffin, it's impossible because the lines are so long. One student came up to me and suggested having a muffin cart on the 3rd floor, or maybe on the 2nd floor, to make sure that students who want muffins can get access to muffins. My suggestion is, regardless of what we do moving forward, it's important to utilize the best source we have, and that is the students. And they're the people who use the cafeteria the most, and I think they would have the best ideas moving forward.
Yeah, please.
So part of the plan is to create a survey which would be sent to all the students after it's approved by administration at the site to get their input. And then once we do the surveys, looking at certain surveys and trying to do one-on-one or small focus groups to get even more information from the students. So it is going to be very student driven as far as where the data is coming from to try to find out how we can best serve the students. And I want to say that your idea about the muffin cart is great. I'm working on having another place to serve food. I'm working with Venture right now to maybe having something open at lunch because the lines can be long, especially break. And I know break is an issue. So that's a great idea. And again, thank you for your input on that.
I'll second the idea on the muffins, but also speak on behalf of the idea of expert advice. Basically, consultants can get good at doing the same thing at 40, 50 different schools and picking and choosing from the best examples out there. If anyone wants to read a nonfiction book over the break, Paco Underhill's Why We Buy is a guy who's studied for years and years and years with an academic research group and students he's got a second book on, I think, Call of the Mall, I think it is. So basically, why we shop, and a whole chapter on the idea that if your aisles are narrow enough that you brush against somebody else in shopping, you won't shop there. You'll leave. You just won't do it. So the butt brush is a phenomenon in a store you avoid. And somebody who has gone to hundreds of malls and seen dozens of stores in every mall is going to have observations apart from what the students are going to also see. I'm sort of speaking on behalf of trained consultants as well.
Thanks. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen DeHart, and I'm speaking with a grovelly voice here on behalf of, as a teacher, actually. And I don't know a lot about this, but I've heard that IHS has taken up this matter within its own classrooms. And so I think the students have been posed with the question you're asking about why aren't they eating more on campus. So I suggest that you investigate a little bit more what's going on there, because that can be student-driven. Surveys and focus groups can also be done by students. That's experiential. And I would also include that we take a look at the guy who won the Nobel Prize for Economics this year about irrational human behavior. So we have to look very differently at how economics plays out, because it's been determined that it is not rational, and we've been doing a rational model for about 100 years now. So we're turning the corner on economics and really changing how we look at it. But my point is that I think students can be integral in this process, doing focus groups, and we have a lot of expertise at the high school amongst our staff, highly educated people who know quite a bit about economics and how to do surveys and how to do them properly and then how to analyze them. So we might think about how we could utilize our students and our staff to get some of this work done. Thank you.
All right, I'm off, 2:59. So I just want to be able to mention that we've been, since the school year started, you guys have talked about doing cuts overall district-wide. In fact, up to 1.5 million or 3 million. My concern is that you guys are okay talking about extending a contract for $4,000 that could definitely go towards health insurance to employees within the school district that don't or have no coverage, a para that can work, a few weeks additionally. That's my concern, that you guys are okay with renewing all of these, but not questioning the fact about what's in front of us. And I am so sorry I missed the July something, what was it, the last 24th that fell on a Saturday to talk about the budget. I was working out of state. But I just want to be able to tell you, please, if we're talking about a crisis, a financial crisis that's being put upon us, and all of you and our community and our kids, then I ask you to also be very prudent about everything that you're just kind of green lighting and saying, yes, this is absolutely necessary. Sir, there's been apps that have been developed that won't cost us or the school district a damn dime to be able to send a text to every student at the school and say, do you like the school food or not? But for myself, in the 5 years that I've been here, and I've had a nephew graduate from the high school, the practicality is everyone looks forward when they're in middle school that in high school they'll get to go off campus to go eat. It's just a grown-up thing that they haven't been given in elementary or in middle school, and it's what everyone looks for. As far as the light being on and that motivates them to want to eat at school, they're teenagers. A lot of them don't want to eat. They just want to go hang out with their friends. But if they're going to be you're going to spend $4,000 on asking a question and doing groups, then I would just highly encourage you, can you put that towards hiring or giving more hours to the cafeteria people at the middle school? Because my son and a lot of other kids' babies don't get to eat because the lines are so damn long in order to get lunch at a time. And it's concerning because a lot of students that take medications like my son make it that much harder that they go the rest of the day without eating when they don't get there on time. So I would say, please be prudent. You have an obligation. And in order to just spend $4,000 that we don't have to continue to make it rain, be responsible about the roles that you guys have on your shoulders. You have two incredible young people here that have sat through many school board meetings, and even when they weren't on the school board, but I would ask you to invite the student government to take this on as a project for the next 6 months and see, hopefully, by the end of the school year, why they don't want to eat your food. Can we use those $4,000 to be able to put it towards the AMS, the middle school, so that there'll be more people that can serve the food for kids that do want to eat and they can't go off of campus? Thank you.
Paul? Excuse me, Paul. So I related to that, I just want to clarify that Fund 13 cannot be used to hire teachers or like. So this is not part of the 1.15 million that we use. This is a completely separate set of money that must be used only for food service. Is that correct? It could be used to hire somebody else in food service at the middle school, but it can't go outside food service, correct?
Well, actually, it couldn't even be used to hire somebody because it's $4,000. It's not $4,000 a year. Yeah. So I don't know how far it would go in terms of hiring anybody. Okay, I'm going to make one comment, then we're going to take a couple more. We have a whole room full of people waiting to talk about something else. So I hope we can get to a vote on this soon. I just want to give some support to Clell. He's run the food service in the Black since he's been here. He's an incredible manager, and if he feels that this money is worth spending and will increase the chances that he'll stay in the black, I'm willing to support him on that. But that's just my personal opinion. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we're about to vote, I request we have a roll call vote.
Absolutely, we can do that. Ross.
I'd like to sort of comment on the role of the board. I mean, the role of the board is essentially to exercise oversight and governance of the administration. And there's a level below which I am absolutely agreeable to letting the administration do what it proposes as best, and then we verify. So a year from now, I'd love to see your numbers. How have you done based on what, if we approve this tonight? Did it get better? Did it get worse? Should we spend some more next year because it could get better than that? There's a level below which I'd really like to let the administration run the district. I'd love to exercise oversight.
Okay, thanks. Charlie, were you going to say something?
Well, I would just echo your statement. I think we do want to support the cafeteria program. If this is what they feel they need to do moving forward, it's not a large amount of money. It's coming out of a very specific fund. And I see no reason at all we couldn't also augment this with all the good ideas that have been suggested in terms of bringing in responses from IHS or from other students. We don't need to limit ourselves to this particular project. I'm sure it can help. So with that, I'm very comfortable with the proposal.
Okay. Is that a motion?
So I move that we approve this proposed contract.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I had a question, just really fast. This specific fund, I just wanted to know what what the purpose of this fund was. Like, what else could this money go towards?
It's just for food services.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a second on Charlie's motion?
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a request for a roll call vote, starting with the student board members, please.
Student Board Member Silwall.
Yes.
Student Board Member Athanayak.
Aye.
Board Member Tutain.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
No.
Board Member Blanchard.
Yes.
Vice President Stapleton Gray.
Aye.
President Black.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Now, does anyone need a break before we go into this? We might be here a while.
You have one more
Doing the
contract.
Sticky Lab contract.
Just one more contract.
Oh, we do have one more quick. Okay, let's hope we can get that one done quickly. Independent contract agreement with Sticky Art Lab.
I'm going to turn this over to Marie Williams.
Okie doke. So every year, the district receives a donation as a result of fundraising to provide enrichment in elementary classrooms. Earlier this evening, you approved several of these contracts that were coming back for renewal. This particular item is coming before you as a review and action item because we have not procured this particular service before. The funds used to provide this service are coming from donations that have been received by the district, and we ask that you approve this contract at this time.
Okay, so this is donated money. It's not out of the general fund.
Correct.
Okay.
I move that we approve the sticky art contract.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All, do we anyone need to comment first? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Now, does anyone need a break before we go into this next item? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Sorry to keep you waiting, but we need to get our heads in this.
If we're going to take a break, I'll take it.
Next item on the agenda is certificated and classified management salary schedule.
Thank you, President Black. At the last board meeting, board gave direction to staff to come back and put this on a review and action item and to provide the following documentation: the current salary schedule, the proposed salary schedule that management put forth, schedule with the reduction of the dollar amount added in the early 2000s and any subsequent additional increase for benefits, salary comparisons from neighboring districts, and a verification for the financial impact and cost. And so what you have in the board backup are the items that the board asked. It starts off with a letter from the Alameda County Office of Education's Chief Business Official, Jeffrey Potter, for the board's review, as well as the current certificated management salary schedule, management's proposed, as well as, the salary schedule with the reduction, and I believe the board also asked for salary comparisons. And so with that, I will open it up to the board. Thank you.
Okay, so there are three options listed in the board packet, but option one was the straight raise that was tabled months ago and that nobody has proposed seriously that we should vote on. So I think we can skip over that to options 2 and 3.
Why was it put in there then?
I don't know. I didn't put it in there. I think just because it was suggested at one time. Option 2 was the option proposed, is this right? Proposed by management? And option 3 is the one that Jacob requested.
That is correct.
So let's do them in order. Option 2, I believe we have people from management who want to talk to this. So let's hear from them first. Then we can ask them questions. Then, Jacob, if you like, you can talk about your option.
And the letter from the county as well, too.
Right.
Good. Alexia Ritchie from the high school. Thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate it. In June, the board discussed a 2.5% raise, which surfaced the history of management group being the only group without district paid benefits. We went back, we looked at this, and the board tabled the 2.5% raise that had been given to other employee groups. This allowed space for the management team to discuss the inequity that exists within the group, as some members take home significantly less than their peers if they are head of household and provide benefits for their family. We also realized that the amount of salary folded in over time for two-party benefits did not keep up with the cost of health care, nor did the Me Too raises given each year. Our salaries have been decreasing when compared with health care costs. Those are for those management members who are head of household. These factors contribute to an inequity and an instability that exists within the management team that does not exist in other employee groups. If we have life events that alter our healthcare needs, this will impact our members in ways that other AUSD employees wouldn't experience. And this led us to craft a proposal to the board and begin the conversation of obtaining equal access to healthcare for management members. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Darren McNally. I'm the coordinator of alternative education for the district. I just want to talk through some details of the proposal that is before the board. Option number 2 in the board packet. This proposal was the result of discussions that have been going on since June between the board and senior management and other administrators and administrative groups. Under this proposal, all current management will hand back the raise that we were given for 2016, 2017, and we'll have our salaries frozen. So we are offering to essentially see an immediate cut in our salaries in exchange for health benefits. In addition, there will be a new management salary schedule put into place. This new management salary schedule will have lower starting salaries but will have greater increases year to year, which will incentivize administrators staying and growing with the Albany Unified School District. All current administrators will have their salaries frozen until their salaries essentially catch up with until their placement on the new salary schedule catches up with their current salary. For most of management, that means 3+ years of frozen salaries at a salary lower than their current level. This proposal costs the district just over $30,000 a year in total costs by the 2020-2021 school year. This proposal only costs 1/5 of the original 2.5% raise that was originally brought before this board in June, in the form of handing back the 1.25% we received for 16-17 and not receiving a raise for 17-18 as was originally proposed. This proposal is also cheaper than the board simply taking no action and keeping the current status quo in place. If we keep the 1.25% raise from 16-17, the district will see a greater cost of $45,000 a year by the end of that same 5-year period. And most importantly, this is a better proposal. Under this proposal, there's greater equity between the administrators. We're more than happy to hand back a certain amount of salary in order to see greater stability and greater equity between us and our compensation. We want to be here. We want to stay here. We really would like to continue to serve our students here, and we would like to not see concerns about the safety and health of our own families get in the way of that. And so this proposal really is a win-win, and we're happy to compromise in order to see health insurance benefits for the people that we have here. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm David Hoppert, Assistant Principal at the middle school. As my colleagues have stated, we're here tonight after months of conversation, listening and compromise because of the unequal access to healthcare that exists within the district's management team. Every day, each of the school and district leaders before you work tirelessly in the pursuit of educational and academic equity for each and every one of our students. This pursuit requires that we also seek equity on behalf of our teachers and staff members, of our families and community members. Whenever inequity is discovered within our students, staff, or community, those groups turn to us and you all as the district leaders to correct these inequities so that each person can feel respected, valued, and successful in our schools. Correcting these inequities requires us to listen, understand, and act with compassion, as doing so communicates a message of value, understanding, and respect that is essential to creating equity. As our school board, you solely hold the power to correct the inequity of our access to health care. Before you are several options, but there is only one option that restores our equity of access to health care and has a minimal cost impact to the district. There is only one option that is 5 times cheaper than approving a raise that you were prepared to approve in late June. There is only one option that is 2.5 times cheaper than taking no action on the raise that you did give us in June. And there is only one option that allows you to create equity with compassion. And I would like to briefly speak to that option, which is option 3. Within and beyond our pursuit of equity for our students.
Option 2, right?
Correct. I'm saying that option 3, option 2 provides us equity of access to healthcare with compassion. But looking at option 3, within and beyond our pursuit of equity for our students, this board depends on committed professional leaders to realize the best schools for our students and staff. This requires administrators who know our community and students. As the district implements critical initiatives for student learning while simultaneously facing difficult financial cuts, I wonder what the value of school continuity in school leadership is. This board needs school leaders with the institutional knowledge and history that is integral for the courageous conversations and important decisions that lay ahead of us. Asking your current leadership team to take a $21,000 pay cut will force some of us to consider futures outside of the district. Not having guaranteed access to health care benefits means that some of us will have to consider futures outside of the district if our life circumstances change. Research into the average tenure of principals shows that elementary principals stay for less than 5 years and high school principals stay for slightly more than 3. and at present, half of our certificated administrators have been here for less than 3 years. I wonder, what will be the impact of a constant churn of administrators, and what will that do to the quality of education in this district? What will that churn do to the health of our schools and our communities? We ask that the board take action tonight that demonstrates our collective commitment to equity, to send a message that you value and respect your school and site leaders, and to create a district where we can truly communicate and lead together. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, now what I'd like to do is just first round of questions. I would like to restrict it just to questions about this option. Then Jacob will talk about his option, and we can ask questions about that, and then we can give general comments, comparisons, feelings, whatever, make it a little more general. So does anyone have specific questions for the management about option 2?
Public or?
Anybody? Jacob?
Yeah, before we even get into option 2, is it possible to go over the letter from the county, or is that?
You want to read it out to us, Jacob?
Well, there's just one section that I had highlighted it, so it's on page 217 of the board packet.
Go ahead.
Well, if we could have it up there, that'd be helpful. Yeah, thank you. On this, if you could scroll up a little bit, please. Thank you. So the thank you. So the second to last paragraph, the last sentence, where it says it appears the implementation of these reductions would allow the district to afford the proposed agreement, although the district would remain unable to meet the locally defined reserve of 9% in 1920. To me, that really stood out because we still have a current board policy of a 9% reserve, and that 9% reserve is tied into the $1.15 million cut we've already made, and we're talking about making additional cuts, possibly keep that 9% reserve in. So this just adds more to our difficult decision-making process if we do accept the proposal, and this was from the county, so I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, do you want to present your proposal now, since?
I had one comment on option 2.
Into the mic, please.
Sure. So if I could sort of characterize how option 2 looks like compared to the current option, there is cuts to the lower positions, deep cuts to the lower positions, sort of commensurate with health, and then a steeper ramp up. And if we're addressing the two issues of healthcare coverage and sort of competitive salaries, I understand that. Two of the line items really jumped out at me, though, and that's the two pool positions. The numbers in option 2 are identical to the current salary schedule. If we're proposing to also give health benefits to the pool positions, we're essentially saying, let's keep their salaries exactly as they are, minus the impending raise that we've tabled, and we've added health care. Maybe those escaped the construction of the table. We are, and I understand it may be coming from a different budget, but if we're doing a sort of an equitable change of everybody's status, those two positions don't change, actually, other than, I gather, the addition of health care. I mean, if you look at option 2 and current pay schedule, they're the same numbers.
Alan?
That is correct. The reason for that was because in June, when we reviewed the pool positions, out of 15 pools in the surrounding area, they were ranked 15 out of 15 at the lowest. And so with the comparison, we looked at both a salary adjustment as well as access to benefits. And just the salary adjustment alone that was approved by the board put them up to 13 out of 15. And so it was with the access to benefits that would make them competitive.
I would then again ask, please, when these sorts of issues come to the board, note that there are apples and there are oranges, and we're trying to deal with all the fruit salad at the same time. Because if we're dealing with the issue of folding in health coverage, and that's our primary concern, and we've got to juggle some numbers to get there, including paying a little more possibly, it's hugely disappointing to find out that we're also I'm willing to believe we're addressing the long-term retention and hiring issues. But this is a whole other thing, too. We've got the third issue of, well, our pools aren't competitive. Well, make that case, but make it independent of fixing the healthcare problem.
Thanks. Jacob?
Yeah, so as far as option 2, I wanted to also get some clarification if possible. If you could scroll to page 223, please. Oh, yeah, no, thank you. Oh, I think it's one more.
One more.
Gently. Here we go. A little bit higher. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I'm having a hard time understanding. I've heard it over and over that it's only a $30,000 cost to the district, but I'll just take one of the most extreme examples. So I'll take the one on top, AHSVP, current top step. So right now they're 10th out of 21. Option 2 takes them all the way up to 2nd. And I'm kind of not quite sure how you can pass 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 to get yourself in that position when it's basically being explained as cost neutral. So I would like some help with that, please.
Sure. The difference between the actual cost for the agreement and the compensation rankings is the compensation rankings focuses on what's accessible versus the cost projection, which is based on current staff. So what's accessible with the compensation rankings is that somebody would come in and have access to full family health care that other employees have, whereas the cost projection of $30,000 over a 4-year period just looks at current staff and what their situation is at current.
Right, but I brought that up before. You can't assume down the road that the situations that we're in right now is going to stay that way. When you budget and when you lock into a new contract, you have to assume that everyone is going to take that benefit. That's just standard when you're looking at it. I mean, we can't assure that what happens tomorrow is not going to be the same the year after, or the year after, the year after. It's putting us in a position that we might not be able to afford this deal down the road if things change, which they always do.
Charlie?
So I think we might be moving into comments from questions, so I'm going to go ahead and comment. I did have the same concern that at present, I think fewer than half of the management staff maybe would choose to or are paying for their own benefits. This proposal, option 2, because of its structure, has built into it a means for paying for benefits in the future. It took me a while to come to grips with that. Basically, because we have in this proposal about a $30,000 difference between Step A and Step F. We have almost a $50,000 difference between Step A and Step F with longevity built into it. That means that, say we have a retirement, 2 retirements, 10 retirements, whatever it might be. People retire from the top of the salary schedule, not the bottom of the salary schedule. So somebody retires from the top of the salary schedule. When we hire somebody to replace them, we hire them at Step A. I mean, that would be, I think, my suggestion. I know it's sometimes tempting to hire somebody with more experience, but I think we need to focus on hiring new people at step A or whatever it might be. When we do that, we have just freed up $30,000 to $50,000. If they take benefits, we've got the money in the difference between the retiree compensation and the new hire compensation. So I'm much more comfortable with that potential cost in the future, having thought that through.
Yeah, but that's assuming anybody who leaves the district is going to retire. There might be people who just move who are not at the top of the salary schedule. And then just to say now, so we can afford this deal, anytime somebody else comes in new, we want to pay them at the bottom and get somebody who's inexperienced so we can afford this deal. What kind of, we want the best and the brightest out there, right? So now to be able to make it cost neutral, we want to take it and hire everybody at the bottom, brand new.
Jacob, do you want to present your option so we can?
Yeah, I would.
Discuss.
Before we even get into option 3, Violet sent an email. I just want to make sure I'm hearing it properly. She stated that she kind of created the first page of the report, and Alan had created the charts and the numbers. And as far as the wording and the bullet points, who actually is that attributed to?
So board backup, which is page 215 through the page 216, I create that portion of the backup. Alan created the tables that the board asked for. Anything else that went, and of course the letter came from the county. Anything else that was added was put together, I believe, by the management team.
All right, because I have some issues with something that was stated on page 225. So if we could please scroll down to page 225. Yeah, that works. That works. Nope. Yeah. So the second to the last bullet point. I'm just curious who said that, because those are not my words, and those are not the school board's words. So when it says this proposal signifies a vote of no confidence in the management team and signals that the district does not value high-quality school site and district-wide leadership, whose words are those? So that's how you feel about the board? If we have a different option that we're throwing out there for discussion, it means it's a vote of no confidence in all of you guys? I would please like an answer to that.
I mean, we do have a statement related to proposal number 3. What's tough for us under proposal number 3 is it's a salary cut to every single administrator in the district of $21,000. That's a significant hit to a lot of us.
Right.
And we see that as a statement that essentially this board views us as expendable and unnecessary, and a place where they would like to take pieces off. And that proposal, proposal 3, taking $21,000 from each person would cut hardest at those of us who are at the bottom of the salary schedule. And to us, it feels like a fairly blunt and thoughtless way to attempt to achieve this ends. And we feel that it's a statement that essentially that the board's thoroughly unhappy with the administrators it currently has and would like to completely reconsider how we are compensated.
That's really how you guys view this? Because, I mean, I can't speak for the whole board, but I can speak for myself. I have complete confidence in all of you. My children go to school here, and I have a high value of respect for administrators. I'm a teacher myself. You know, I've stated before, I bargain quite a few times, and it gets kind of, a little heated back and forth, but to get into personal attacks about somebody's character, and you said it's kind of blunt, this and that, like you're expendable. So somebody last time called me inhumane. I mean, is that where we're getting to in an open session when we're supposed to be coming to some kind of resolution and we're going to get into name calling? I mean,
I apologize if it feels like I've called you or anyone on this board a name. I don't mean to communicate in that way. What I'm thinking about is when I have to, go home and say that this district has decided to remove from me, who has been here for 10 years, and this is my second year as an administrator, who went through a pretty rough year last year as a first-year administrator and decided to stay, that this board decided I was overcompensated during that time period.
But I don't see how you get that. We didn't just say, give us $21,000. You said give us health care. So all I said was, let's move back and see what you got. I understand it's going to hit some people harder than others, and I really, truly feel for you guys. And I'm speaking from the heart right here. It's a little hurtful to me, too, that the way that this whole discussion has been going down. Maybe this doesn't pass. But to just insinuate that even the fact that I brought this up and it passed through, that we don't care about all you guys, I mean...
It's really hard for us to feel cared for when we're looking at having our salaries cut, or we're looking at a situation where healthcare is driving career decisions in a place we like to work. And I'll just tell you my personal situation with option 3, there is no version of option 3 where my compensation stays the same. So I will have to go home and explain that even though this district values me and believes they have confidence in my work, we need to take a look at our finances. And that would be very difficult for me to do, and I don't know how I'm supposed to reconcile being asked to immediately take a fairly significant cut when, for me it's $21,000. For people at the top of the salary schedule, it would also be $21,000. That doesn't feel fair or equitable. And then to turn around and say that, no, this district does actually really value me. This district values the time I've put in, but now they feel like they need to reduce some compensation for me. I don't know how I can reconcile those two viewpoints.
Darren, why don't you let some of the other people speak?
And I think I'll speak from my perspective. I'll use my I statement. When we began the conversation, we didn't know how this was going to go, and we kind of asked for no cuts and just health care. And then you all gave guidance and direction and asked for cost neutral. And we worked really hard to come to consensus as a group to find something that worked for those people that were head of household and not head of household, that are very different situations financially. And so we did our very best to come within we came within $30,000 over a 4 to 5 year period of cost neutral. And so it seems like we're very close from that. And so then to have a proposal that comes in that's not even close to that, it just hurts. And that's all I would say. I felt we were really close within that guidance of the board, and we were hopeful about that. And then to see that come this way just felt that way.
So you guys were hurt, so you decided to use hurtful words towards the board and me.
The words that we put in there, I didn't feel were intended to hurt the board in any way, shape, or form. It was just a statement of our view of the proposal.
All right.
Charlie?
Well, I have a couple questions about option 3. And maybe I can ask most easily if we could scroll back to that page that has the graph on it. It's a few pages back. There we go. Okay. So, for better or worse, I was on the board in 2005 when the board approved that change. And hindsight is 20/20. And in hindsight, I can see that there are significant problems with the action that was taken. I think what we've done is we've created a 2-tiered salary system. The other way around, when everyone is provided with benefits, and those who don't take them are entitled to $1,500 in lieu of benefits, isn't that big a discrepancy between people. But if you look at what we have right now, we have up to a $34,000 discrepancy between people who are at the same position or step on the salary schedule. And that's just too big. So it's clear to me we have to do something. The current system just, it just doesn't work to have a two-tiered system. So I guess the question I have about option 3 is, well, why is 21,000 the right number? So if we look at that line, yeah, the red line ends at something called 21,289.52. But you know, one of the things I do feel strongly about is that the district has to follow through on its commitments, its agreements, even the understandings that existed. And certainly one of the understandings that existed in 2005 was that the district would continue to compensate management staff at a rate commensurate with the cost increases of the two-party benefits. Now that did not continue after 2012. So by the time we get to today, you've got about a $5,000 discrepancy between that blue line and the red line. So I would argue that at a very minimum, if you were going to do a flat takeoff from the salary schedule, it shouldn't be 21,000, or you can take that off, but you better put the $5,000 back. That is the difference between the blue line and the red line. Or maybe you should be putting back the $14,000 that is the difference between the gray line and the red line, because really everybody else in the district has access to family plan. So you could think of this as you're reimbursing employees for costs they've borne themselves. So I'm just not clear why 21,000 would be the right number, because you could argue, well, maybe it should be 21,000 less 5,000. Maybe it should be 21,000 less 34,000. Maybe it should be 21,000 less the sum of all of those. You know, I think it's very difficult to roll back a whole trajectory like this with any kind of simple corrective. And so I think rather than just trying to roll back and undo history, it makes more sense to me to work on a new management salary schedule. And I appreciate the effort that went into trying to produce something that is cost neutral. I think it's more cost neutral than it seems, because it seems to me we're actually comparing it to the current salary schedule. And yet we were prepared to approve that extra 1.25% increase that is codified in option 1, I believe. And so it seems to me that you know, what we have here is that option 1 costs us $150,000 and option 2 costs us $30,000. But that's assuming the baseline is current. If the baseline is really the option 1, because we were ready to approve that, then option 2 represents $120,000 cost savings. You know, these numbers, you can twist these numbers around all different kinds of ways here. But I think in the final analysis, what I have seen, option 2 is actually a sensible proposal. It puts everybody on the same kind of compensation package. Although the cost is listed as a net cost over 3 years of $30,000, almost all of that is focused in the current year. And the current year is when we have a little bit of reserves to actually deal with that cost. Years 2 and 3, there's a net savings to the district. And for the reasons I mentioned before, again, it's hard to do without a lot of very specific scenarios, and we don't have the specific scenarios because we don't know who's going to stay, who's going to leave, who's going to retire, who's not going to retire. But I think that the option 2 because it has that built-in $30,000 to $50,000 difference between step A and step F, has sufficient flexibility in it to cover the costs of benefits in future years. So I think that I can't understand quite how to make any kind of flat rate adjustment in a way that makes sense, in a way that you can defend the numbers. So option 2 is the one that seems to make sense to me.
Charlie, is that a motion?
I can move that we approve option 2. I don't want to preempt our discussion, but I'm willing to do that.
Seeing that it's 10:15 at night.
Then I would.
Well, but we're not talking about.
We don't have to stop discussion because we've had enough.
That's true. So you can continue discussion with a motion on the floor. So I would move that we approve option 2.
Do we have a second on that? Kim, is that a comment or a second?
It's going to be both, really. I think that last spring, when I was a very new board member and this question of option 1 came up, and I asked for it to be tabled because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to vote. I wanted to think. And I definitely didn't intend any disrespect to the management team at that point. I just needed time to think. And I believe that I said also last spring that I felt like it was difficult to make comparisons, to our teacher salary scale and the rest of the Bay Area and our management salary scale, because the management were in this weird position of having partial payment for benefits worked into their salary, but it wasn't really enough to pay for health care. And I said I prefer a system that was an apples to apples, where everybody has the same benefit package. And I think that perhaps that's what sort of planted the seed of this. And when management went back, when we said, we have a structural deficit, we have a terrible problem on our hands in terms of the budget, and we have this goal of wanting to have equitable health care, but it has to be cost neutral. And when I saw what you guys did, the detail of the proposal about freezing the salaries and rolling this back and staying at your step and all of this other stuff, I was really impressed by the work that took and the people who are sacrificing so that we can get to an equitable system. And with that, I feel like I can second Charlie's proposal for option 2.
So let's do this. Let's have a roll call vote, and each person, when they're called, has the option to explain their vote or just to vote. Start with the students, please.
Well, and I wonder if it's appropriate to ask the students, given that the students of the schools, I would welcome, if they chose to abstain, I would entirely understand.
Well, they're allowed to abstain.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying that to Mahima and Navin that the reason we ask you guys to vote first is because your votes are advisory. You can't advise us if we don't know how you're voting. So it's not to put you on the spot so much. But there was a previous vote, for example, where we had a roll call, and I thought that it was very appropriate that you guys voted first, and I had a chance to hear what you voted and to take that into consideration. But we'll absolutely understand if this seems too uncomfortable to vote on.
Right. You're welcome to abstain if you want to. Jackie?
Student Board Member Silwall?
Abstaining.
Student Board Member Athanayak?
Abstention.
Board Member Tutain?
Aye.
Board Member Clark?
I'll vote no, and I just want to say the reason why I'm voting no is with everything that's going on with these huge budget cuts, I kind of ran on being fiscally responsible. We could look at the charts however many times we want. I've said it over and over again. In my opinion, it's not cost neutral. Down the road, it's going to cost us an awful lot of money, in my opinion. I respect all the management team, okay? I really do. And, you guys put up a good fight, and I'm voting no, but I'm just trying to explain why I'm voting no. please don't take it personal.
Thanks, Jacob. And can you work with Jackie to make sure that it gets in the minutes the way you want it?
I'll write it up and send it to you. How's that sound?
Am I doing the minutes, or, I got an email last time too. I have to clarify what I'm saying in open session.
You don't have to, but it's better than her misquoting you, so just check what she writes.
All right.
Thanks. Charlie?
Aye.
Member Blanchard. Vice President Stapleton Gray.
I'll say a couple of things. I raised the point earlier about the pool salary schedule, and I really don't like the idea that we're sort of looking at apples and oranges and some pineapples in this case. If we previously voted on the salaries for the pool and that was deemed to be non-market competitive in the result, a better time would be to address it at that point. Now, on the other hand, we're talking about here the one salary schedule that's potentially sort of rather arbitrary. I mean, we could come back next year and say, it turns out we're paying everybody too much, and we're getting a line around the door for that vacancy we had an assistant principal. This isn't like the ATA contract. This isn't like something where it is a struggle, and I actually wish we could be a little less arbitrary and a little more predictable. And I'm hoping that what we see down the road is that the salaries are in line and the budget doesn't balloon and whatnot. We have some recourse if it does. We could just say, we're going to do a little clawback of, $1,000 per position, and if people leave, there may be others. I'd rather have our administrators sort of hired and retained like the teachers, like all the other represented groups. So let me say I have a little bit of concern that the numbers we're seeing here may be artificial, because when the real world happens, the real world will happen. But I would like to vote aye and see us adopt a management structure more equitable and in line with the rest of the district.
Thank you. I'm also going to vote aye. I'm going to suggest that all non-negotiated salary schedules be reviewed periodically. And we don't have that as a standard thing, but it probably should be. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for all the work you put into this. With that, we are adjourned.
Well, no, we have.
Matters? Oh, sorry. Agenda items, matters introduced by the board.
Yes, we have election methods as review and action, hiring freeze as a review and discussion, academic calendar committee, and school start times. And we've moved the MOU with the Behavior and Mental Health Agency.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay, with that, we're adjourned.